Hey there, night wanderer. Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe you're in bed or curled up on the couch with a warm blanket. Wherever you are, let the rain outside soothe your thoughts and slow your breath. If you enjoy this quiet corner of the internet, feel free to like the video, and I'd love to know. What time are you listening to this? Drop it in the comments. Are you an early dreamer or a true midnight soul? All right, close your eyes, settle in, and let the story begin. I was just supposed to paint a mural. That was all. 6 weeks, one tunnel wall, a grant-funded art project from the city, and a stipend barely enough to cover gas and groceries. I took it anyway. After everything that happened in Portland, the breakup, the gallery fallout, the collapse of everything I thought I wanted, I needed quiet work. I needed something slow and private, something no one would come to see. Bell Street was perfect for that. The tunnel ran beneath an abandoned rail spur, just outside the town of Gret Hill. The kind of place where the gas station still sold cassette tapes, and the bakery doubled as a hardware store on Sundays. The tunnel itself was no longer in use, just a long concrete throat spanning a dried-up creek bed, half overgrown with moss and graffiti too sun-bleached to read, about 140 feet long, damp, smelled like rust and mildew. They wanted a mural to revitalize the space. No theme, no press, just something to make it feel less like a leftover. Their words. I didn't ask questions. I packed my paints, a camping chair, and a week's worth of food. The town let me sleep in an unused maintenance office above the old grain silo, one room, a cot, and a single window overlooking the tracks. I arrived in early October. It was already raining when I got there. I walked the length of the tunnel the first afternoon. It felt longer than it should have, not just in distance, but in weight. The walls were oddly curved, subtly sloped inwards at the top, like they were pressing down. You couldn't tell from outside, but once you were 30 feet in, the sky disappeared entirely. There were no lights. The far end took forever to come into view, even on clear days. On rainy ones, like this, it was a hallway into nothing. The floor was mostly dry, but I could hear water running somewhere in the concrete below it, or behind it, like a hidden stream that hadn't been mapped yet. I assumed it was drainage. Still, it echoed. Every footstep came back in strange rhythms. Sometimes I'd stop walking and still hear the faint tap of steps, like someone a few paces behind me. I tried to laugh it off. Just acoustics. The first night in the silo was fine. The cot was narrow, the floor creaked, and the wind hissed through the window frame like breath, but I didn't mind. I liked that kind of quiet, the kind you could lie down in and not hear your name. But that night, I dreamt of water. Not drowning, just water. Slow, heavy, curling around the ankles, flooding a room with no windows. I woke with the scent of moss in my nose and the faint sound of dripping steady, rhythmic, like a faucet in the next room. There was no faucet, just a desk, a lamp, and a calendar that had already marked off my 6 weeks in soft pencil. Each morning, I drove to the tunnel, set up my gear, and began sketching the base layers. The tunnel stayed empty. No one passed by. No joggers, no dog walkers, no kids throwing rocks. Even though it ran beneath what used to be a main trailhead, I never saw another person cross it. That was fine with me. I let the mural grow slowly, tendrils of shape and color, crawling up the walls like vines. I didn't know what I was painting yet. I never did at the start. But already it felt like something was asking to be uncovered rather than created. The echo persisted. I thought it would fade once I filled the tunnel with work, once the walls had their own voices again. But no, the footsteps continued. Always faint, always too close. One day, I stood still for over a minute, listening. There were 6 steps, then nothing, then one, louder, like someone had stepped directly onto the line I'd just painted. I turned. Of course, the tunnel was empty. Still, I stepped outside, wiped off my brush, and took lunch on the hood of the car. It was raining again. Always raining. Soft, persistent, not enough to flood, but enough to blur everything in fog. By the end of the second week, I began noticing flaws in the concrete. Hairline fractures, not vandalism, not weathering. These were deliberate. Scratches in the surface beneath old graffiti. Symbols, not letters, not anything I recognized, but patterned. They lined the far end of the tunnel. Symbols that seemed to mirror my brushwork, as if I was painting towards something I didn't know I'd already seen. The dreams returned. This time not of water, of light. Not sunlight, a cold, underwater glow, pulsing through cracks in the floor. A rhythm, a message just outside my ability to translate. I woke one morning with paint on my hands I hadn't used the day before, a pale green, slick and sticky. The can was still sealed. I checked the mural. Someone or something had added a single stroke to one panel, a curved shape, like an open eye. The paint was still damp. I was alone. I didn't report it. I didn't want questions. Besides, some part of me wasn't afraid. Not yet. Some part of me had begun to suspect I was no longer just painting the tunnel. The tunnel was painting through me. On the 14th day, the mural changed. Not visibly, not in content, in tone. It was more precise. The lines steadier than I remembered. Curves I didn't recall sketching now completed themselves in my mind before the brush touched concrete. And in the negative space, the empty patches I had planned to finish last, I began to see shapes. Human? Maybe. But stretched. Narrow. Bent too low. Watching. I kept painting. Not because I had to. Because I was supposed to. The mural kept growing. By the start of the 3rd week, it had outpaced my original sketch. The design had shifted. What began as abstract color now had structure, a kind of spiraling form rising from the tunnel floor like a tower drawn in perspective. The central shape looked architectural, not a building exactly, more like a place remembered, then painted by instinct. Each day I returned, the image seemed to change slightly, not in ways I could easily track, but in ways I felt. Sometimes the mural felt taller, sometimes narrower. Sometimes I stood back, and it looked like it was watching me. The echoing footsteps came back, but they no longer matched mine. They had a rhythm of their own, now slower, heavier, like someone walking barefoot through the tunnel a few seconds after I stopped. And this time, They didn't stop when I turned around. They just faded, like someone slipping behind a wall just before I looked. I started to bring a second flashlight, clicking it on every few minutes just to be sure I was alone. I always was. At least, visibly. I told myself I was just unraveling a bit. I wasn't sleeping. The rain never let up. The sky never fully cleared. Each night, I sat in the maintenance office and watched the fog roll down the hills like liquid fabric, curling at the edges of the train yard, folding into the tunnel like it belonged there. One night, I fell asleep with my jacket on and dreamed I was painting with my hands, not brushes. The wall was soft, skin warm and breathing, and when I pulled back, the color was spreading on its own. When I woke up, my fingertips were raw, and the center of the mural had grown by 3 feet. I stopped using my reference sketches. They no longer made sense. The lines were wrong. I'd hold the paper up beside the wall, and the shapes would drift. The sketches looked outdated, even though I had just made them. Instead, I painted by feel, and the mural responded. It flowed. Sometimes it even felt like it moved first, and I was only catching up. On the 19th day, I saw a man at the far end of the tunnel. Only for a moment. He stood just past the mouth of the curve, backlit by the rain light, face obscured in the mist, tall, still. I called out. He didn't move. I stepped toward him. 1 pace, maybe 2, and in that blink, he was gone. Not walked away. Gone, as if he'd never been there. That night, in the office, I found a scrap of canvas pinned to the wall behind the radiator. I don't know why I checked, just an instinct. On it, scrawled in dark ink, was a phrase, "The tunnel remembers what we forget." The wall was never blank. I left it there. The next day, the water sound inside the tunnel was louder. I put my ear to the concrete. It was unmistakable flowing water, rushing fast and deep, far below the floor. Not the faint trickle of drainage. This was a river. There were no rivers on the map, and the mural, it began to bend. Not the paint, the wall. The curvature of the tunnel grew more pronounced as I worked. I measured it. I marked a level line and watched it tilt by the next morning. The ceiling dipped just slightly lower each day. The walls leaned a little closer. By the end of week 4, the tunnel felt inverted, like I was walking inside a closing throat. That was when I began hearing the voice. Not a word, not a sentence, just a tone, humming from the mural itself low, like wind in a buried vent, or the vibration of something breathing beneath metal. I held my breath and listened. The mural shivered. I thought about quitting, packing up, sending an email to the arts committee, making up a reason. But every time I stepped back to leave, I felt guilt, like I was abandoning something that needed finishing, like I was leaving a sentence half-spoken. That guilt turned into compulsion. I began painting through the rain, through meals, skipping sleep. The mural became the only thing I saw when I closed my eyes. The curve, the shapes, the impossible depth of it, it took on a kind of pull, not hypnotic, not magical, just right, like it was a memory I'd forgotten how to say. Then the tunnel changed again. The lights I never installed began to flicker. Small pinpoints like bioluminescence, faint greenish-white glows hovering near the base of the wall at night. They pulsed in rhythm with my footsteps. When I stepped back, they dimmed. When I returned, they brightened. The mural grew brighter with them. I tested it. I painted a curve, a new one without meaning, just emotion, and the light responded. It shifted, adjusted, not with me. For me, that was the night I saw the face. It was raining harder than usual. A cold, loud storm that turned the tunnel into an echo chamber of water and wind. I just stepped away from the far end, maybe 60 feet in, when I looked back to check the center symmetry. And there, between two shapes I didn't remember drawing, was a face. Not real, not in flesh, but clear, embedded in the negative space of the mural, like it had always been there hiding. Long eyes, elongated cheeks, a mouth just slightly open, expressionless, and perfectly symmetrical. It disappeared when I blinked. But I felt it again later, in the silence after the rain, in the reflection of the paint can, in the angle of the window back at the office. I realized the tunnel wasn't just remembering, it was studying me. On the 25th day, I stopped being afraid of the echoing steps. They didn't stop, but I no longer turned around, because I began to sense that whoever was following me was me, just a version slightly behind. I found another note the next morning, folded under my palette, written in my handwriting. But I hadn't written it. You are the last shape. Finish the mural. Finish becoming. I stopped keeping track of the days. It wasn't intentional. Time simply softened, blurred. The rain didn't help. It fell day and night, without pause, so consistent it felt like background static in my body. Sometimes gentle, sometimes harder, but never truly absent. The tunnel had no windows, no clocks. The office above the grain silo lost power twice that week. My phone died. I stopped charging it. None of it mattered. All that mattered was the mural. It had changed completely, not in pieces in purpose. What began as a collage of lines and color had become a structure, a map, a message. The lines intersected now, points of convergence that followed no mathematical logic I could recognize, but still felt exact. The shape drew you in. It was geometric, like cathedral architecture, with arching voids and stair-like forms layered deep into the tunnel's surface. I couldn't say what I was painting anymore, only that it wasn't coming from me. It was coming through me. The tunnel was warmer now, even in the rain. The floor radiated heat, damp but comforting. The mural itself had a temperature almost like breath. When I leaned close, I could feel it exhale. When I stood back, the air cooled again. I touched one section of it just lightly, with the tips of my fingers. The paint was still wet, but I hadn't painted that part in over a week. And then there were the openings. It started small, a section of wall that looked deeper than it should have, like the paint had carved inward. Then a corner appeared, an edge, a curve that folded into itself. I stepped back, held my flashlight low, and realized the wall wasn't flat anymore. There was an actual recessed alcove. No crack, no break in the concrete. Just space, where space hadn't existed before. The mural had made depth. The water beneath the floor had grown louder. It pulsed now. Not a stream, a heartbeat. Thump, thump, pause, thump. I crouched, pressed my palm to the center of the floor. The whole tunnel trembled, a low-frequency resonance that rattled my bones, but didn't hurt. The mural shimmered in the light. And then, for the first time, it spoke. Not in words, but in sound. A deep tone, like a cello bow dragged across stone, unfurled from the center of the wall and passed through me. Not around me. Through. And when it stopped, I was kneeling, and I was weeping. I returned to the office soaked and numb. I didn't sleep that night. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see black. I saw walls that breathed, lined with dozens, maybe hundreds of murals, all slightly different, all painted in the same impossible hand. And standing in front of each one, a version of me, brush poised, head tilted, not working, not waiting, listening. I woke with paint under my fingernails I didn't remember using. It shimmered faintly under the lamplight, a color between blue and green, like oxidized copper. I held my hand up to the window. The rain made patterns on the glass, the same ones I had painted the day before. The following day, I stopped using brushes, not by choice. I just forgot them. I arrived at the tunnel and realized I'd left my entire pack behind, but the mural still welcomed me. My fingers found the lines again. Each movement felt rehearsed. The wall curved where it should have been flat. A new alcove opened, this one deeper like the mouth of a hallway. And then came the figure. For a week I had heard steps, seen shapes, but this was different. I turned toward the tunnel mouth for light and saw someone just beyond it. But this time, they stepped into view, slowly, gracefully, not approaching, becoming visible. A tall form, not cloaked, not shrouded, simply undefined, as if the light refused to name it. Its outline was made of shifting brushstrokes, constantly rewriting its shape. It didn't speak, but I heard its voice. Inside me, "You are almost the right shape." Then it was gone. The mural behind me glowed, just faintly, like something beneath the surface had stirred. I pressed my hand to it. It was warm. That night, I found the maintenance office door open. Rain on the floor. Inside, everything was the same, except for one new item. A mirror. Oval. Standing. Leaned against the far wall. I hadn't brought it. I hadn't seen it before, but I recognized it. Because it was in the mural. I stood before it. I expected to see myself. I didn't. I saw the tunnel stretched, warped, infinite, and inside it, walking slowly toward the viewpoint, was the figure, the one from the tunnel, now clearer, sharper. It had my outline, but the arms were too long, the neck too thin. It raised its hand. So did I, but not at the same time. I was half a second behind. I turned the mirror toward the wall, but the reflection stayed. The mural was almost finished. Not because I was nearing the end of the wall, because I could feel it. The work was closing in on itself, folding into a kind of final message I didn't need to interpret. I only needed to deliver it. Each curve I painted was a word I couldn't speak. Each shape, a thought I couldn't think. But the mural knew what it was saying, and the tunnel remembered it. One morning, the far alcove opened completely. I stepped inside. Not painted, real. A short corridor, just 10 feet deep. At the end, a wall of wet stone, and in the center, a symbol carved into it. Not painted, carved. A spiral of eyes, a shape that pulsed. My hand reached out. I touched it, and the tunnel spoke again. You are remembered. I haven't gone back to the silo since. I sleep in the tunnel now, wrapped in its hum, cradled by the rhythm of unseen water, kept warm by the mural's light. The rain continues, but now it falls inside too. Not dripping, just presence. A soft wetness that reminds me, you're not finished yet. I see the others now, the ones who painted before me, not in visions. In the layers beneath the wall, ghosted hands, half-faded symbols, fingerprints in corners I hadn't touched. I know their names, though I've never spoken them, because the tunnel keeps them, and it's ready for mine. I woke to silence. No rain, no echo, no wind. The mural behind me was still too still, the kind of stillness you feel between thunderclaps, when the air forgets how to move. The tunnel no longer looked like a tunnel. It looked like a chamber. The mural had closed in on itself, not in a literal sense, but in meaning. The shapes were finished. The light, though faint, seemed to pulse from beneath the concrete, illuminating not the wall, but the idea of a wall. I ran my hand across its surface and felt heat, not warmth. Heat like something alive had just stepped away, and its shadow was still burning. That was the day the tunnel opened. At the far end beyond where the curve used to be, a new section had formed. Seamless, continuous. The concrete had stretched. It was no longer 140 feet. It was longer, far longer. I walked, not out of curiosity, out of invitation. The air grew dense like walking into water, thick with memory. The walls shimmered faintly. I passed panels where no paint had been applied and saw images flicker there anyway, faces, shapes, windows I couldn't recall ever drawing, but which seemed familiar all the same. I stopped when I saw myself. Not a mirror, not a reflection. A painting on the wall of me, brush in hand, face turned slightly toward the viewer, painted in the same colors I'd been using all along. I reached out. The figure's eyes blinked, and then it smiled. The tunnel had no end anymore, not visibly. It spiraled subtly, but constantly, as if the concrete had been softened and bent by some enormous force beneath the ground. Each step forward took more from me, not physically, but mentally, emotionally, like I was shedding versions of myself the deeper I went. Eventually, the light dimmed behind me, and ahead, there was only one thing. A door. Not a real door. Not wood. Not steel. just a shape at the end of the spiral, a frame of rain suspended in air vertical, like a window turned inside out. In the center, a faint glow, and beyond it movement. The moment I saw it, I remembered. Not everything, just enough. I remembered being a child and drawing spirals in the fog on car windows. I remembered staring at the pattern on the carpet at my grandmother's house, convinced it was moving when I blinked. I remembered the first time I stood in front of a painting and felt it looking back. The tunnel was all those things. A collector, a translator, a mirror too large to frame. It didn't make art. It absorbed it. And it had chosen me not to create, but to complete. I walked through the door and stepped into something else. It was not a room, not a space. It was a memory, not mine, but I was inside it. The walls were damp. The floor was stone. Above me, a ceiling like the inside of a lung, curved, organic, dripping with light that didn't shine so much as remember itself. And in the center, a pool, not of water, of reflection, like someone had liquefied every thought that had ever been painted on the tunnel walls and poured it into a bowl too deep to see the bottom. I stepped to the edge. The surface quivered, and I saw myself, not as I was, but as I had been, at every age, every shape, every thought I had left unfinished. Behind me, the walls whispered, not in language, in images, a gallery of people I'd never met or perhaps forgotten, standing silently, watching, and each one of them looked like the mural. Then, the water moved, not like liquid, like consciousness. It rose, took shape, and the figure from before the tall, brushstroke skin shadow emerged from it. Now it stood clearly before me, and it spoke, not with a mouth, with memory. You have finished remembering. You are the shape we were missing. I couldn't move, because I understood. The tunnel wasn't a place. It was a record, a self-writing memory engine buried beneath the forest, pulling artists, creators, broken minds to itself, using them to build its own identity. Every mural, every brushstroke, every symbol, a word in its language. And I had finished the last sentence. The water reached my feet. It wasn't wet. It was knowing. It slid up my legs, over my chest, behind my eyes, not covering, not drowning, just becoming. And I heard the final message. You are now inside the work. When I woke, I was standing in the tunnel, the original one. Gray walls, concrete floor. The mural was gone, the paint gone, but the wall shimmered faintly, like it knew. I drove back to the silo, packed my things, slept one last night under a ceiling that didn't breathe, and in the morning, I left. No one asked questions. No one came looking. I never saw the committee again. But sometimes when it rains just right, I hear the tunnel calling. And I know it remembers me. I don't live near Gret Hill anymore. After I left, I drove south for a while. Through towns I didn't stop in, until the sky changed color and the roads forgot my name. Eventually, I found a place with dry air and blank windows, a city large enough to disappear inside. I don't paint anymore, not like I used to. Now I trace patterns in condensation. I scribble on napkins. I catch myself sketching symbols into the corners of books I don't finish reading. I tried to throw out my journals, but they keep finding their way back. The pages fill themselves. In my sleep, I sometimes murmur words in a language I never learned, but I know what they mean. People sometimes ask what I've been doing with my time. I tell them I've been working, which is true, but I don't say what kind of work, because I don't know how to explain it. How do you explain to someone that a tunnel, a place that isn't a person, or a machine, or a god asked you to finish its thought? How do you tell them that when it rains, you hear a voice, not one you recognize, your own? The tunnel still exists. I know because I went back once. I wasn't planning to. I thought I'd just drive near it, pass through Gret Hill, maybe stop at that gas station and see if it still sold cassette tapes. I didn't make it that far. Halfway down the old access road, the rain started. Hard, instant. It hit the windshield like memory, like a knock on the glass from inside your skull. I pulled over. I didn't get out, but I looked through the trees and saw it. The tunnel entrance, still there, still waiting, still breathing. But the mural was gone. No paint on the walls, no symbols, just smooth concrete that shimmered in the corners of your vision, like it had never been drawn on, like it had absorbed everything, including me. Sometimes I wonder what happened to the others, because I wasn't the first. The notes, the painted shapes hidden beneath my work, the footprints I never left. The tunnel has been collecting for decades, maybe longer. People drawn to it, artists, wanderers, anyone with too much memory and nowhere to put it. It doesn't lure you. It recognizes you. And when it does, it gives you what no one else can. A place to finish the shape of yourself. I think it keeps part of us, not to use. To remember, that's all the tunnel ever wanted. To know itself, and to be known one brushstroke at a time. I see signs of it elsewhere now. In the way paint runs down a brick wall during a thunderstorm. In the echo inside parking garages late at night. In the exactness of a crack on an abandoned overpass. It's never far. Not really. The tunnel isn't a location. It's a condition. I don't know how long I'll keep hearing it, but I'm not afraid. Not anymore. Because I understand something now. I was never sent there to finish the mural. I was the mural. And the moment I accepted that, the tunnel stopped being a mystery. It became a mirror. And in it, I saw myself not as I had been, but as I had always been becoming. If you ever find yourself at the edge of something quiet, a tunnel, a hallway, a forgotten passage soaked with rain, and the walls feel warmer than they should, and your thoughts begin to hum with colors you don't remember knowing, keep walking. Don't rush. Listen. Paint if you must. Whisper if you can't. But whatever you do, let it finish you. I took the job because of the rain. Not the pay, which was terrible. Not the location, which was in the middle of nowhere. And definitely not the hours, which ran dusk to dawn. 7 days a week, no exceptions. I took it because it rained. Steady, constant, and strangely comforting, the kind of weather that made silence easier to bear. And after the last year I'd had the accident, the long recovery, the phone calls I stopped returning, I needed silence. The listing was for a live-in caretaker at a rural lighthouse compound called Lantern House, perched on a cliffside in the outer edges of coastal Maine. I hadn't known there were still active lighthouses that needed caretakers. The posting was vague. Single occupancy, remote, all utilities included, must be present overnight, no guests. There were no pictures, no formal application, just a P.O. box and a phone number that rang 5 times before going to a mechanical voice that said, "If you're still interested after the first storm, the job is yours." That was it. I arrived in October. The road to Lantern House was barely a road, more like a suggestion, a winding gravel track that disappeared behind mossy trees and dropped suddenly into a steep bend flanked by rusted guardrails. The ocean came into view slowly, revealed in fragments through mist and pine. Then came the house. It didn't look like a lighthouse, not in the traditional sense. No tall tower, no beacon spinning on a distant cliff. Just a 2-story house of gray clapboard tucked beneath a tall black lantern tower, square instead of round, rising like a crooked chimney above the roofline. The glass chamber at the top was still intact, though the light inside no longer spun. Instead, it glowed faintly like a sleeping eye half-lidded against the sky. The rain had already begun. A man met me at the gate. I don't remember his name, or if he even gave it. Late 50s, wind-worn face, hands like rope. He handed me an old-fashioned key with a brass ring and said, "Stay inside after sundown. Walk the house every 2 hours. That's it." Then he left. No contract. No tour. Just me, the house, and the rain. The interior of Lantern House was warmer than I expected. Wood floors, old carpets, the faint smell of salt and soot. A main sitting room with a stone fireplace, a galley kitchen, and a narrow hallway leading to 3 doors, one locked, one to a supply closet, and the last to a steep stairwell I assumed led to the tower. Upstairs was the bedroom, clean, spare, and already made. A lamp, a journal, and a folded paper note on the nightstand. The note said, "Let it see you, but don't stare back." Nothing else. The first night was uneventful. I walked the house as instructed, every 2 hours, checked each room, made notes in the journal. Nothing strange, just wind and rain, and the occasional soft creak of old wood adjusting to the weather. The lantern above the house glowed faintly through the storm, casting a gentle shimmer through the stairwell window, not bright enough to light the house, but just enough to remind me it was there. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, woke to fog so thick it looked like the sky had fallen, and I felt fine, more than fine, settled. The days that followed were the same. Wake, eat, read, walk the perimeter, sleep, repeat. No internet, no signal, just the ocean, the woods, and the long shadows of Lantern House at dusk. At night, the glow from the tower would pulse softly. No movement, no rotation, just a single point of steady light, like a star caught in glass. But something shifted on the fifth night. Nothing loud, nothing overt, just a subtle change. During my 2:0 a.m. round, I reached the base of the stairwell and felt watched. Not threatened, not even frightened, just observed. I glanced up the stairs. The light from the tower glowed through the slats in the ceiling, and for a moment, just a flicker, I thought I saw a shape pass across the glass above. Tall, slow, human-shaped, but there was no sound, no creak of footstep, no door, just the rain tapping at the windows like fingers on wood. I told myself it was shadow, maybe a tree branch, maybe fog, but something in me knew that wasn't right. Something in me knew it had seen me. The next morning, I found the journal open. I hadn't left it that way. My last entry had been, no change. Quiet night, tower light steady. Now, beneath it, a second line had appeared, in smaller handwriting. Not mine. It walks when you look away. I spent the next day checking the locks. There were no signs of a break-in, no prints, no tracks in the wet soil outside. The tower door still locked, but when I touched the handle, it was warm. That night, I skipped my 2 a.m. round. I stayed in bed, watched the stairwell from the edge of my blanket, listened. The rain grew heavier. The wind rose. The walls trembled slightly like breath. And at exactly 2:03 a.m., I heard footsteps, soft, measured, coming down the stairs. They paused at the landing, then turned around and walked back up. I waited until dawn to move. The door at the base of the stairwell remained locked, but now there were wet footprints on the wood. Only 3, leading down and then vanishing. I didn't leave. I don't know why. Some part of me, some small, quiet part, didn't want to. I wasn't afraid. I was being studied, and some deeper part of me wanted to understand why. I've started walking at night without the lantern. The glow above is enough. It pulses softly, almost gently now, like a heartbeat. The journal stays closed, but sometimes only. Sometimes I hear the creak of footsteps above me, in rhythm, like something pacing, waiting. The rain hasn't stopped in 10 days, and I haven't looked up at the tower since the 7th, because I don't know if I'll like what looks back. There are sounds the house makes that I've learned to ignore. The groan of floorboards expanding, the whistle of wind through the chimney flue, the tap of rain on the windows. They repeat, predictable, part of the rhythm. But lately, there's been a new sound, a pause. It started on the 8th night. Not a noise, exactly the absence of one. During my second walk of the evening, as I passed the base of the stairwell, I noticed the rain had stopped, just for a moment. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Long enough to be wrong. The quiet had a weight to it. Not peaceful, not tired, expectant. And then just as quickly the rain returned. Harder, like someone had pressed play again. The journal had another entry I hadn't written. Beneath my 10:0 p.m. note, in the same faint, scratchy hand as before, It remembers you now. Don't look up. I closed the book and placed it under my pillow. It was still there in the morning, but the page had turned itself. I started walking the house more often, not because I was told to, because I felt like I had to. Every hour now, sometimes less. The rooms never changed. Nothing moved. And yet, the feeling grew like the house was subtly shifting away from the world, inch by inch, wall by wall. I tested the locks again. Front door, side door, cellar hatch. All sealed. But the air was different, warmer at the doorways. Cooler near the center of the house. As if something outside was pushing in, slowly. And then there was the light. It no longer stayed in the tower. I don't mean that the glow itself moved, but I began seeing reflections in places the lantern couldn't possibly reach. The hallway mirror showed light where there should have been none. The window above the sink would flicker, even when clouded with steam. And once, just once, I saw it pulse against the floor beneath the attic door. There is no attic. Not on the blueprint. Not in the house layout. But the door is there now, high in the ceiling above the stairwell landing. I didn't open it. Not then. The 13th night was the worst so far. Not for what I saw, but for what I didn't. I was mid-round. Midnight. Wind loud. Rain harder than usual. A downpour that rattled the shutters. I turned the corner into the main hallway, and every single window had gone black. No glow. No moon. No storm light bleeding through the mist. Just nothing. As if the house had sunk below the earth without warning. I stood still, held my breath, and then the lantern light returned, not outside, but behind me. I turned. It was shining down the stairwell, through the floorboards, like someone was carrying it. I called out. Stupid, I know, but I needed to say something. I needed to hear myself, to prove I was real. The light vanished. I didn't sleep that night. At 3:17 a.m., something brushed the bedroom doorknob. Not loudly, just enough to rattle it. Just once. When I checked it in the morning, it was damp. The journal was open again. The message read, "If it knocks, don't answer." I started remembering things differently. Small gaps in time. Mug in hand one moment, next moment. Mug gone, already rinsed. Pages of the book I hadn't turned now read. Shoes left by the door, already dry after a walk in the storm. I began to wonder, was I still walking the house, or was something walking it for me? I tested myself, left a marble at the base of the stairwell before sleep, marked its position with tape. In the morning, the marble was missing. 2 hours later, it rolled out from under my bed. The next night, I stared at the tower light too long. Just a few seconds. I hadn't meant to. I was brushing my teeth. Caught a glimpse through the small round window near the sink. It flickered, then blinked, like an eye adjusting to the dark. I froze. The air in the room dropped 5 degrees. The breath in my lungs stopped feeling like my own. Then a pulse of light. Not white. Red. Faint, brief, but unmistakably red. I shut the curtain. Sat on the kitchen floor for nearly an hour. Didn't walk again until dawn. When I finally went upstairs, the attic hatch was ajar. There is a rule to the house now. I don't know who made it. Maybe the house, maybe the thing in the light. The rule is this: walk every hour. Let it see you. But never, ever open a door that shouldn't be there. I think it's testing me, not cruelly, curiously, like it's trying to remember something about itself, and it needs me to reflect it back. Last night, it rained harder than I've ever heard. The sound rose like a tide. The light flickered in time with my pulse. The journal fluttered open on its own. And for the first time, there were 3 lines written there. It needs to be seen. It needs to be known. But if you name it, it will wear your voice. I don't speak aloud anymore. Not at night. The house listens too closely. I stay awake longer now. And when I sleep, I dream of the light walking through the halls, not flickering, striding. And in the dream, I never see who carries it. Just the glow. Just the feeling that something has finally found me. The attic door is open now. I didn't open it. I would swear that on anything. I've never even touched the pull string. But this morning, as I passed the landing, it was already down the hatch, gaping like a mouth. The ladder extended like a tongue resting on the stairs. There was no dust on the rungs. Someone had used it. I stared up into the blackness. No sound. No light. Just a presence. Not aggressive, but waiting. I didn't climb. Not yet. But I think it knows I will. That night, I skipped the 1 a.m. round. The house didn't like that. At 1:06, the front door unlatched itself. Not blown open, it turned. Slowly, smoothly. The deadbolt slid free with a metallic whisper, and the door cracked wide enough to let in the sound of rain that wasn't there a second before. I closed it, locked it again, didn't speak, didn't write anything down. But the journal was already waiting on the kitchen table, open to a blank page. At the top, scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting, "Walk or it will." I did my next round with my hand on the wall the whole time. I don't know why. I just needed the contact. Something solid, real. The floor creaked differently now, slower, more deliberate, like someone matching my steps from above. And when I paused at the stairwell to listen, I heard breathing, not loud, just long, wet inhales that filled the stairwell like fog. I started hearing things in the rain, not voices, not words, patterns, soft rhythmic pulses in the downpour. Not musical, exactly, more like a language made of pressure. It came in waves, 3 short bursts, 1 long, silence. Then again, it felt like code, like something was signaling. I tapped back. Once. A single knuckle tap against the window frame. The rain stopped for 5 seconds, then came back harder. That night, I found a puddle in the center of the upstairs hallway, perfectly round, still, cold, and in the middle of it a single match, unused, dry, lying across the word "look." I lit the match. Just once. Nothing happened, except the journal turned a page by itself. And on it, "Now it sees with you." I slept on the floor of the sitting room after that. Didn't make it upstairs. didn't try, but I dreamed deeply. Not just fragments, not floating images, a full dream. I was standing in the lantern chamber at the top of the house, surrounded by windows, the storm screaming against the glass, and in the center, not a bulb, not a flame, a mirror, tall, old, freestanding, and in the mirror, I didn't see myself. I saw the house, from the outside, from high above, like a god watching a candle float on a black sea. The light inside it pulsed once. Red. I woke with a nosebleed. The match was gone, but the journal now said, "Don't break the mirror." I hadn't seen a mirror in the house until the next day. Behind the supply closet, tucked behind old tarps and sealed paint cans, was a long, cloth-wrapped rectangle. I unwrapped it. Same mirror, same height, same shape, still dry, still cold. I moved it to the hallway, but every time I passed it, my reflection was delayed, like it waited a half second too long to follow. At night, the mirror started fogging. From the inside, I covered it again, and the next time I passed it, the cloth was back on the floor, neatly folded. That evening, I walked to the tower stairs. The hatch was still open, the attic still waiting. I climbed 3 steps and stopped because I could hear something above me. Not footsteps, not breath, writing. A pencil or pen dragging slowly across paper, scratching, pausing, continuing. When I finally went up just 1 hour later, the attic was empty. No desk, no notebook, but the floor was covered in wet footprints. Bare, long, toes too narrow, heel too sharp, and one of them was mine. I went to the kitchen, stared into the sink for a long time, and then I said, aloud, for the first time in days, "What are you?" The lights flickered. The rain stopped for exactly 1 second, and I heard something drag across the roof slow, like a wet hand pulling a fingernail over the shingles. The journal was waiting by the stove. It said, "Don't ask questions you're willing to become." I don't write in the journal anymore, but I still carry it. It follows me now, whether I want it to or not. Always open to the next page, always blank, until I sleep. Then, it fills itself. 2 nights ago, the stairwell grew longer. I don't know how else to describe it. I counted the steps 14, turned, counted again 16, then 20. By the time I reached the lantern chamber, I had counted 26, but I had never climbed more than 15 before. The air inside was dense. The light was no longer steady. It pulsed like a slow heartbeat wrapped in fog. And in the center, the mirror, still standing, still watching. I approached it, close enough to see my breath on the glass, close enough to notice that my reflection wasn't breathing at all. It stared at me, and then it blinked. My reflection blinked. Before I did, then it smiled. I stepped back. The light went red, and the stairs disappeared for 2 hours. I stayed locked in the lantern chamber. No exit, no floor below, just the mirror. and the red light pulsing around it like a womb of glass. When the stairs returned, I ran down, didn't stop until I reached the front door, tried to open it. It was nailed shut from the inside. I don't know how long I've been here now. Weeks? Longer? The storms never stop. The house hums when I sleep. The mirror moves rooms. And sometimes, at night, I hear a voice at the door, my own voice, asking to be let in. I don't answer, because I think the light has found its way into me, and I'm starting to remember what it was like to be on the outside, watching the house, waiting for it to open again. The mirror won't stop moving. I've stopped trying to control it. Every morning, it's in a new room, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes at the foot of the stairs. Once, I found it standing in the hallway, facing the bedroom door directly aligned, like it had been waiting for me to wake up and see myself from the other side. I never saw it move, but I always felt when it had, a shift in the air, a heaviness, like the house was bracing for what would happen next. It's not just the mirror anymore. The light is changing. It still pulses through the tower window each night, but it no longer fades with dawn. Now, during the day, it leaks through the walls, faint but present, like a heartbeat inside the plaster. It touches everything. My shadow doesn't fall quite right anymore. It curls in the corners like it's reaching for something. And sometimes, only sometimes, it doesn't match my movements. I've stopped marking time. Not out of apathy, out of necessity. Clocks don't work here anymore. The wall clock in the kitchen spins like it's caught in water. My wristwatch melted slightly. I found it in the fridge, ticking backward. Even the pages of the journal flip on their own, skipping forward 3, back 5, always landing on the same sentence. It needs a witness. The attic is different now. It wasn't just a space above the ceiling. It was a room beneath the skin of the house. I went up again last night. Had to. The rain was pushing in from all sides, a sound like screaming through cotton, and the attic door had swung open again, slow and careful. It didn't creak this time. It welcomed. The space inside had deepened. No longer just a crawl space, now wide, dimly lit from no source I could find. The walls were wet, and on them, painted in lines I don't remember making, were faces. Long, blurred, almost human. Each face had only one feature, a single eye, open too wide, sketched with trembling strokes, like whoever made them couldn't stop once they started. One of them looked like me. In the center of the attic was a mirror, not the same one. This one was taller, and it breathed. Not metaphorically. I mean, it fogged and cleared, pulsed at a slow rhythm, matching mine until it didn't, until it overtook me, until I found myself swaying in time with it. When I blinked, I was inside the mirror. Not physically, but consciously. It felt like my eyes had turned around in my skull and started seeing from the other side. I was no longer in the attic. I was in a reflection of the house, darker, inverted, but otherwise identical. Only emptier. Not abandoned. Wiped. The rooms were hollow. The furniture sagged like it had wept itself into ash. And in every window, the storm raged in reverse water rising into the sky, trees bending upward as if mourning. There was no sound, but I heard something, a feeling that filled the air like static. The house speaking, not in words, but pressure. And then a single sentence, formed not in the air but in me. "You are the last room." I woke lying at the top of the stairs. My nose was bleeding again. The mirror was gone, but the journal sat beside me, soaked but open. This time, the writing was familiar, mine, and it read, "It's not haunting me. I'm haunting it." That was the moment it clicked. The house, the light, the mirror, none of it was chasing me. It was remembering me, like something trying to reconstruct an image that had gone fuzzy, a dream trying to wake itself by replaying the person who dreamed it. I'm not the first. That much I know. I've seen the signs, in the markings behind the wallpaper, in the names etched on the underside of the kitchen drawers, in the way the boards creak differently, depending on how I step, as if they're learning the rhythm of a pattern they've played before. And now it's almost finished. I feel it in the way the light no longer pulses. It burns steady. The tower is fully lit now, day and night. A dull, red core like a coal buried in glass. The house doesn't breathe anymore. It holds its breath, like it's about to speak. I've started seeing my reflection in places that aren't reflective. The stove, the wood grain, the underside of my eyelids when I blink too long. And each time, the reflection is closer to the mirror version. Eyes wider, posture straighter, hands still even when I'm trembling. It's almost me. Tonight, I went to the top of the tower. No steps this time. The stairs were gone, but my feet carried me upward, one level at a time, the walls parting around me like mist. And at the top, I didn't find the mirror. I found the light. It was hovering, still, a sphere of dull flame held in a black iron frame, not hot, not blinding, just aware. It turned toward me. No sound, no shape, but it turned. And in that moment, I understood. It was not built here. It was born here. From memory, from ritual, from the slow, aching attention of people walking the same steps again and again in silence. From watching, always watching, and waiting for one person to look back long enough to be remembered. It needs someone, not to die here, not to live, to stay, to anchor the house, to give the light a name it can wear when it wakes again. I touched the iron frame. It hissed, but didn't burn. My breath caught, my knees buckled, and from the light came a single image, not a word, not a face. A room, empty, waiting, exactly the shape of my body. I stumbled back, down the stairs that weren't there, into the house. And every mirror in the building, the hallway, the bedroom, even the reflective curve of the stove showed the same thing. Me, standing in the tower, smiling. I am no longer sure I ever left that room. The rain stopped today, just before dawn. No tapering, no wind, just silence. I stepped outside for the first time in weeks. The ground was damp, the air sharp with the smell of pine and salt. But above me, no clouds, no storm, just a thin blue sky wrinkled with light. And still, I could feel it, the pulse of the house behind me, steady as breath. The front door did not creak when I returned. The floor no longer groaned beneath my steps. The walls held a quiet that was not empty. It was full, listening, like a stage after the final line has been spoken, waiting for the audience to leave, only to realize they had become part of the play. I walked each room, once more, not as a ritual, but as a farewell. The mirror in the hallway reflected nothing, not darkness, not me, just the tower of the light now, a quiet ember, still and waiting. The journal was open on the kitchen table. Final page. One line. You've become the room that watches. I understood now. The house had never trapped me. It had needed me. Someone to fill the shape left behind by all those who had come before, shapes worn thin by silence and memory, until only their outlines remained. I wasn't replacing them. I was completing them. The house wasn't a haunting. It was a memory loop, a machine of attention, kept alive by witness, by routine, by someone willing to watch it long enough to be seen in return. So I stayed, not out of fear, not even out of obligation, out of recognition. I had become part of it, not a ghost, not a prisoner, a reflection in its endless mirror. I sit now in the lantern chamber. The light is warm, not bright, but warm. It no longer flickers. It breathes with me, or I with it. We don't speak. We don't have to. Sometimes the rain returns, but only for a little while, just long enough to call someone new. I feel them when they come up the path. I hear the floorboards adjust to their weight. I watch the kitchen lights flicker when they step inside. The house greets them gently, not to frighten, to learn. And when they ask if anyone else is here, when they check the rooms, when they write in the new journal, placed quietly on the table, I wait. I don't appear. I don't knock. I just watch. From the tower, from the walls, from the mirrors that will start to turn slightly off-center over the next few days. They'll stay for a while, and if they're quiet long enough, if they walk the house the way I did, if they ask no questions but feel the answers anyway, then maybe the house will show them what it showed me. That being remembered is a kind of survival, and being seen, truly seen, is a kind of peace. If you ever find your way here, to a lighthouse without a beacon, a house with a mirror that walks, a storm that knocks from within, do not run, do not name it, just let it see you. And if it sees enough, it may show you what you were always meant to become. I took the wrong turn. That's all it was. I was driving back from my sister's place in northern Vermont. A weekend visit that ran too long, filled with too many sidelong questions, too many silences over lukewarm coffee. I told her I was fine, that I was getting over everything, that I just needed space. She didn't believe me, but she nodded anyway. It was raining when I left. Not hard, just that soft, whispering kind of rain that coats everything in gray. The highway was empty. I was tired. I missed an exit, and then I missed another. When I checked my phone for directions, there was no signal, no map, no anything. The screen spun a little compass rose and told me I was off route. I wasn't worried, just annoyed. I figured I'd keep going until I hit a gas station or a town. Instead, I found Belmare Road. It wasn't on any map, not even the offline version cached in my phone. Just a narrow 2-lane track that sloped gently between thick pine woods, half covered in mist and fallen needles. There was a wooden sign at the turnoff, barely legible. Belmare, 6 miles. I took it, not because I thought it would help, because something about the name felt familiar, though I couldn't remember why. The trees grew taller, the sky darker. After about 10 minutes, I passed a cluster of old buildings, clapboard houses with sagging porches, a diner with its letters rusted away, a church whose steeple had collapsed inward like a crushed chimney. Belmare. It didn't look abandoned. It looked like it had paused, like everyone had left for lunch in 1962 and just never came back. The rain picked up. I pulled over beside what looked like an old post office, engine idling. The place had a small awning, so I stepped out to stretch and maybe find someone to point me back to the highway. The door creaked open before I could knock. Not fully, just enough, like it had been waiting. Inside was dry, warm, even. Dust danced in the air like old film grain. The front counter still had a register, envelopes on the wall, a glass case full of ancient keychains and little wooden bears. And behind the counter, sitting very still, was a woman, maybe 60, maybe older. She didn't look up at first, just kept turning something over in her hands, a thin black envelope with no stamp. When she finally did speak, her voice was hoarse. "If you're here, you've been here before." I told her I hadn't. She smiled, but not like she believed me. I asked for directions. She told me there were none. She said the road would take me where I was going, but not before it was ready. I should have left right then, but I didn't, because something about her voice made the rain sound further away, made my chest stop aching for the first time in months. She pointed to a small guest house, 2 doors down, told me the key was under the mat, that it was always under the mat, and that someone would bring groceries by tomorrow if I stayed put. "You don't have to be gone yet," she said. "Not until you remember what you left behind." I don't remember unlocking the door, but I remember the sound of the rain when I stepped inside. It stopped being sound. It became a hush, like the town itself had put a hand to my mouth and whispered, "Don't speak, just listen." The guest house was simple. 1 bedroom, a sitting room with a fireplace, a kitchenette, a writing desk under a narrow window. There was a lamp on the desk, already on, a notebook beneath it, blank, except for the first page. "Day 1. You've returned. Let it remember you." I don't remember falling asleep, but I dreamed in shapes, not places, not people, just the outline of things I'd forgotten. A blue bicycle, a handwritten map, the sound of someone calling my name from very far away. When I woke, the fire was burning, the window was open, and the rain had stopped. But the streets outside were empty, not silent, just holding their breath. I stayed, at first just for the night, then 2, then a week. The woman at the post office never asked questions. Every day, I'd walk the town, the library with no titles on the shelves, the church with no pews, the barber shop full of broken mirrors, and something about it all made sense. Not in memory, in feeling, like I was stepping through a place I had once built in a dream and left behind before it was finished. Belmare wasn't abandoned. It was resting, and it was waiting for me to remember why. The quiet wasn't what unsettled me. It was the way the quiet listened. Belmare didn't hum with silence the way old towns do. It didn't creak or echo or rustle. It simply waited, like a room right after you speak your deepest secret into it the moment after sound. When the walls decide whether or not they'll hold it. I kept walking the town. Each day felt identical. Same washed out skies. Same mild breeze through pine. Same slow tap of leaves against the guest house window each night. And still, I didn't want to leave. Not yet. Because every morning, I woke feeling like I had almost remembered something. A sensation, a place, a name I couldn't place. And when I tried to write it down in the notebook on the desk, the page always turned itself just as my pen touched the paper. The notebook wasn't empty anymore. I didn't add anything, not that I recall, but more pages had filled themselves. Always a sentence or two, always in a steady hand that looked suspiciously like mine. The town remembers in shapes. Keep walking. You haven't seen your house yet. Don't ask them what year it is. They won't lie, but you'll wish they had. I started noticing patterns, not architectural, emotional. Every street in Belmare made me feel a little different. Bell Street made me anxious. The alley behind the church made me sleepy. Standing near the old mill made me nostalgic for something I knew had never happened. And every time I passed the library, I felt like I was being graded, like someone was quietly reviewing everything I'd done and marking it in red. There were no clocks in Belmare, none that worked anyway. The post office had one, but its hands never moved. The diner's neon sign flickered in the same loop every evening, the word open never fully illuminating. Still, I knew when it was time to sleep. The air got heavier after dark. Not dangerous, just full of things I couldn't name. The rain returned on the 9th day, or what I thought was the 9th day, and it brought with it a change. When I stepped outside that morning, the trees had moved, not drastically, not like a fairy tale, just shifted. A small grove that had once sat near the schoolhouse now stood beside the hardware store. A pine that once cast a shadow through the guest house window now leaned toward the church. The earth beneath Belmare wasn't fixed. It breathed. I asked the woman at the post office. I asked if the town moved sometimes. She didn't look surprised. She just said, "Things shift when you're close to remembering." I asked what I was supposed to remember. She only smiled and said, "You'll know when the mirror blinks." Then she handed me a sealed envelope. It had no address, no name, but I recognized the handwriting. It was mine. I didn't open it. Not right away. I kept it on the nightstand beside the notebook. That night, I heard something tap on the window. Not rain, not branches. Knuckles. 3 soft knocks. When I looked outside, no one was there. But on the windowsill, sat a small wooden key, worn smooth, smelled faintly of lilac and salt. I picked it up, and the notebook flipped to a new page. One sentence. Try the blue door. There are no blue doors in Belmare. Or so I thought. But the next day, I saw one. Wedged between the bakery and a laundromat I could have sworn hadn't existed before. Small, narrow, faded navy paint, brass doorknob shaped like a bell. I approached it. The key fit, turned easily. The door didn't creak. It sighed. The room inside was dim, dusty, windowless, smelled like wet stone and forgotten perfume. A chair sat in the center, facing a mirror, tall, frameless, tilted forward slightly, like it had been watching the floor and only now noticed me. I sat. I looked. The mirror didn't show me. Not right away. It showed the guest house, my room, the writing desk, and then it blinked. Just once. The reflection faded, and my face appeared. Not as I was now older, heavier with wear, but as I was 10 years ago, back when I still believed everything could be undone. I stared. The reflection smiled. I didn't. Then it whispered not with sound, but with breath on glass. It was your turn. The room went dark. When I blinked again, I was back in the guest house, sitting on the floor, notebook in my lap. The mirror key was gone, but the envelope I'd left on the nightstand was open. Inside was a photo of Belmare, taken from a distance, foggy, old, and in the corner, written in pen, was a date. June 14, 1997. My handwriting. I was 16 in 1997. That summer, I ran away for a week. My parents never found out where I'd gone. I told them I stayed with a friend, slept in her attic, lied for days. But now I remembered. I'd taken the back roads north. I'd gotten lost. I'd stopped in a town that didn't exist on any map. A town where the trees moved, where the windows blinked, where someone gave me a notebook and told me I wouldn't remember until I was ready to stay. Belmare didn't find me by accident. It had simply been waiting for me to come back. The next day, the church bell rang for the first time. 3 slow chimes. I stepped outside. The rain had stopped, and on the street, every door in town was open. The town opened itself. That's the only way I can explain it. After the bell rang, every building I'd passed by, every locked door, boarded window, sealed gate was suddenly accessible. As though Belmare had finally decided I could walk its whole body. The streets were wet, but not muddy. The air thick with the smell of cedar, paper, and something sweet like honey gone sour. I stepped through the door of the barbershop first. Inside, everything was arranged, as if someone had just left mid-trim. Clippers on the counter, a coffee mug still steaming. A long mirror lined the far wall, warped by time and water damage. When I stepped in front of it, my reflection lagged. Not badly, just half a second. Enough to make my stomach twist. And then, it moved differently. It raised its hand before I did, then tilted its head, watching me. It mouthed something I couldn't hear, but I understood. You stayed too long. I left the shop quickly. Out on the sidewalk, Nothing had changed. The same soft light, the same still air. The buildings no longer looked abandoned. They looked used. The laundry still spun in the windows of the laundromat. The bakery door was warm to the touch. The town hadn't been frozen. It had been hollow, waiting to be filled again. And now that I'd remembered, I was filling it. The second place I entered was the house with the peeling yellow trim. From the outside, it looked like any other home, but inside, every wall was covered in photographs. Dozens, hundreds, all unframed, all stuck with simple thumbtacks, all in black and white, save one, a single faded color image. In the center of the living room wall, it was me, young, smiling, kneeling in front of the guest house. The photo was dated June 17, 1997, 3 days after the one I found in the envelope. In the corner, scribbled in small red pencil, "You said you'd be back." That was the day I remembered the girl. She'd found me crying near the edge of the woods during that long-forgotten summer. No older than me. Kind eyes. Her name was May or something close to that. She didn't speak much. Just walked me back to town and told me the rain would keep me hidden until I figured out what I was hiding from. We played cards one night. She drew me a map of the town, told me the library whispered back if you asked it the right way. And then I left. I forgot her. I forgot everything. Until now, I ran to the library next. It hadn't changed on the outside, but inside the shelves were no longer empty. They were full, not with books, with boxes, labeled in my handwriting, each one with a year. Lansenling R, Lansenlin Ba, Lansenling Isherwu. I opened one. Inside, notes I'd written in college, a sketch of a painting I never finished, a dried flower from a girl I dated for 6 months and never called again. Memories. Ones I didn't even know I'd forgotten. Belmere had them all. I walked the shelves for an hour, maybe more. Each box was a room in my mind, carefully preserved, untouched by decay or time. But at the very back, on the highest shelf, was a box labeled, "Not yours." I opened it anyway. Inside was a small, cracked mirror, and when I looked into it, I saw the town. Not as it was now, but as it had been in that summer. Alive, lit, full of people I couldn't name. And in the reflection, a girl stood near the church steps, waving. I ran to the church. The doors were open now. Inside, the pews had returned. The altar stood clean and dry, and in the front row sat a figure, slim, still, facing away. I approached quietly, but before I could speak, she turned, and it was her, May, but older. As I was older, eyes the same, still kind. She smiled. "You remembered me," she said. I sat beside her. She didn't ask why I came back. She didn't ask where I'd gone. She only said, "You weren't supposed to stay away this long. It forgot how to feel full." I asked what it was. She didn't answer with words. She just placed her hand on the floorboards, and the church breathed. The town was alive. Not metaphorically. It lived in the way old forests do, or deep oceans, or houses where generations sleep in the walls. Belmare was a vessel for memory. Not just mine, everyone's. But only those who found it again could know. "Is it dying?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "It can't hold the shape without someone to walk it. And I'm the shape? You're the return." When I left the church, the streets were no longer empty. People walked quietly, not quite solid, shadows wearing echoes, but familiar. Some I almost recognized: a teacher, a friend, an old man who sold newspapers on my street when I was 5. They nodded as I passed. One even touched my shoulder. It was like being greeted by your own memories, not as visions, as neighbors. The notebook on my desk was now full. Last page, scrawled in the corner: "Belmare is the part of you that remembers what you erased." And beneath it, "It's almost time." That night, the rain came back, but not outside, inside. It tapped against the walls, ran gently down the mirror in the hallway, filled the sink without a sound. I lay in bed and listened, and I remembered more. I had promised May I'd come back. I told her I'd visit again when I was older, when I was ready. She warned me the longer I stayed away, the harder it would be to come back. That the town needed someone to hold it together, not by strength, by knowing, by letting the forgotten things stay remembered long enough to become real again. The next morning, the town had changed once more. The buildings were clean, the windows no longer fogged. The forest had receded slightly, and in the center of town, the post office was now a house, with a porch and a blue door. A key was in my pocket, wooden, worn smooth. The one from the window, long ago. I hadn't brought it, but I remembered it now. The woman at the counter was gone. The desk stood bare, and on the wall behind it, a single mirror hung. No reflection, just the town, waiting. The mirror was breathing. Not literally, of course, but as I stood in front of it, I could feel it pull and push the air in the room like lungs, invisible and immense. The surface rippled faintly, like heat rising off asphalt. It wasn't glass, not exactly. It was like memory made visible, flickering with things I couldn't quite focus on. I saw a porch swing, a childhood bedroom, a hospital waiting room filled with raincoats. Then the image folded into itself and became a single reflection. Me, not as I was, as I might have been. He was cleaner, straighter, his eyes steadier. But there was something in the tilt of his head, not confidence. Resignation. I reached out. He didn't. He only nodded, and then stepped aside. Behind him, a path, a street I hadn't seen in town, lined with lanterns, paved with names I had forgotten on purpose. And I understood. This was the part of Belmare I had never been allowed to see. Not until now. I stepped forward. The glass accepted me like water. The shift was immediate. I wasn't in the post office anymore. I was in the in-between, a dusk-washed corridor of memory and architecture, like a town half-sketched and half-remembered, buildings tilted like sleepwalkers, streets curved back into themselves. The sound of rain fell from beneath the ground, and in every window, every pane of glass I passed, I saw someone watching. Not people, versions of me, at different ages, different moods, different could-have-beens. In one window, I sat alone at a wedding table. In another, I stood barefoot on a cliff. In a third, I was laughing so hard I cried and didn't know why. Each one locked eyes with me and smiled. I walked for what felt like hours or minutes. Time here had no interest in behaving. The further I went, the more the street began to resemble the map May had drawn me so many years ago. Though now, I realized it hadn't been a map of the town. It had been a map of myself, of my choices, of the corners I never turned, of the rooms I never entered. At the end of the path stood a house, familiar, plain, white siding, wooden steps, a porch swing with no rope. My childhood home, the one I hadn't seen since we sold it, the one I had avoided driving past for 20 years. The front door opened as I stepped onto the porch, and inside, I saw all the things I had buried. My father's last letter, my mother's knitting, still mid-loop, a shoebox full of drawings I tore up when I turned 13. The kitchen smelled like old oranges and Sunday toast. The walls breathed in rhythm with my heart. In the living room stood a figure, back turned. I knew it was May before she turned. Only now, she looked different. Older, but not physically older in the way mountains are. Still, contained. Full of things you only understand if you stay long enough. She looked at me and said, "You remember now." I nodded. "Then you understand why it's your turn." Belmare wasn't a place. It was a chamber of memory, a container for the unfinished, the unspoken, the people and things the world no longer had room for. But it couldn't hold itself alone. It needed an anchor, a living memory, someone to carry the shape of the place and keep it coherent, not by force, by attention. May had done it for years, longer than she should have, and now it was my turn. I told her I didn't know how. She said I already had. Every step through the town, every door opened, every old name remembered it, had restructured the place around me. The buildings responded, the streets aligned, the echoes had started speaking again. She gestured to the mirror behind her. It no longer showed reflection. It showed a lantern, hanging in the air above Belmare, spinning slowly. Not real symbolic, flickering. "You'll live," May said. "Not the way you think, but you will. The town will breathe through you now." She walked past me, touched my hand. "I'm going to rest." And then she stepped into the mirror and was gone. The house faded. I stood in an empty street, alone, until the light came on. Not overhead, inside, behind my eyes, like something old had finally found its shape again. And I saw Belmare, not as a town, but as a thought, endless, turning itself over, waiting for someone to hold it long enough to stay in place. I returned to the guest house. The notebook was gone. The windows were mirrors, and in them, I could see the lights of the town spinning slowly, realigning, rebuilding. The next day, it rained again, and for the first time, I saw someone new arrive. A woman, wet from the storm, stepping out of her car on Belmare Road. Confused, tired, she walked to the post office. The door opened for her, and inside, I was already waiting. It's been quiet since she arrived. Not silent, not the old kind of emptiness that held its breath. This quiet has shape, warmth. It moves. She hasn't seen me yet, not clearly, but I've seen her watching the trees shift, writing her name over and over on a napkin at the diner, holding that look in her eyes like she's been trying to remember something all her life. I know that look. I wore it too. Belmare is still rearranging itself for her. That's how it begins, the soft suggestion that a door was always there. The shift of a shadow, so familiar it becomes nostalgic. The smell of rain in a room that hasn't been touched in years. The town is learning her, and she, unknowingly, is beginning to carry it. I walk the streets at night now. I don't sleep. I don't need to. The town breathes through me, not literally, but spiritually. I keep its memories aligned. I keep its doorways open, its corners from unraveling. And when the rain falls, I feel it through the walls. Not as water, as memory. Every drop contains a name once spoken here. Sometimes, Belmare shows me things. Small gifts. A folded letter I once burned. A lost book I thought was stolen. A jacket my father gave me when I was 12, now clean pressed, waiting on a hook by the guest house door. The town doesn't just remember what I lost. It reminds me of what I tried to forget, gently, without shame. The notebook reappeared yesterday, on the desk, open to a fresh page. A single line written in my hand. You're still here, that's enough. There are others like her. Now, they don't stay long. Most don't even realize they've turned off the road. But some of them, they linger. And when they do, I watch. I listen. I help the town shape itself to fit what they need. Because that's the work now. Not to hold on to Belmare, but to hold it out like a hand, waiting in the rain. If I ever leave, the town will remember me. Not as a person, as a pattern. A series of paths and glances and words spoken softly to people who didn't know they were being listened to. Belmare stores us all that way, not as ghosts, as echoes that kept walking. People ask not aloud, but in the way they step, in the way they hesitate before touching the doorknob of the guest house, if this place is real. It is, but not in the way they mean. Belmare isn't a point on a map. It's a turn, the kind you almost miss, the one you take without thinking, when the storm gets too loud and your hands are shaking and the sky gives you nothing but gray. It's a question. Are you ready to be remembered? I still see May sometimes, not as she was, as the shape of kindness that led me here. A wind in the hallway, a smile in the corner of a mirror. She's resting now, but not gone. Belmare never forgets the ones who helped it breathe. Sometimes, I forget who I was before the road turned. I forget the pain, the reason I left, the people I ran from. But the town remembers for me, not to haunt, to hold, so I can become something useful in the quiet. If you ever find yourself there, lost, wet, tired, pulled off the road by a sign that shouldn't exist. Walking into a town that feels like a song you've never heard but somehow already miss. Stay a while. Walk slow. Let it show you what you buried. And if a door opens without your help, if a woman in the post office hands you a letter with your name on it, if your reflection ever blinks first, you've come to the right place. You're home. I never planned to move back. The town was small. Not the charming kind, more like the kind where everyone knows too much, and none of it's worth knowing. When I left at 17, I thought I was leaving forever. I had no intention of being remembered, let alone returning. But then my uncle died and left me his house. It wasn't really a house, not in the way you'd imagine. It was half residence, half library, a sloping roof structure buried in the woods just outside the northern edge of town, where the fog always seemed to settle deeper and the trees leaned too close. Uncle Lionel had been the town's archivist, or that's what he called himself. In practice, he was more like a hoarder of forgotten things. Old county maps, personal letters, unlabeled cassette tapes, yellowed birth records, and newspaper clippings about people nobody talked about anymore. He lived alone, died the same way. And now his estate, which included the house, its contents, and something called the record room, belonged to me. I hadn't spoken to him in years. The last time I saw him, I was 13. He gave me a compass and told me, quite seriously, this house doesn't like being ignored. It keeps better track of you than you do of it. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. But I took the keys anyway. I arrived in mid-October. It had just started to rain, a slow, steady drizzle that had been falling for hours. The road up to the house was little more than a dirt path, mostly hidden beneath leaves and mud. No neighbors. No visible power lines. The closest town was 5 miles away. The house sat in a hollow just beyond a line of pine. It was older than I remembered. The front door was warped, but opened without complaint. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like something inhaled. The air smelled like cedar and paper. The floors creaked not with every step, just some. Like they were listening, choosing when to speak. Inside, the place was massive. Hallways split off in odd directions. The walls were lined with shelves and filing cabinets. Books piled on staircases, stacked beneath tables, organized in ways I couldn't decipher. There were no windows on the upper level. At the back of the house, down a narrow corridor lit by a single green lamp, I found a door labeled, "The Record Room, Private." It was locked. The key ring didn't have anything that fit. The house didn't have central heating, but a wood stove had been recently used. A kettle still sat on it, half full. I poured it out. The water was black. I didn't unpack that night. I just dropped my bag by the bed and lay on the mattress, still wrapped in plastic. The rain tapped against the roof like it was writing. I dreamed of paper, stacks of it, reaching the ceiling, and a figure sorting through them with long, careful fingers. He wasn't my uncle, but he wore his coat. The next morning, I began cataloging. It seemed like the only logical thing to do. Every shelf, every drawer, every labeled binder, and handwritten note. Some were dated as far back as 1890. Others had no dates at all, only names. Always first and last. Always capitalized. Some of them were mine. By the third day, the rain still hadn't stopped. The lights flickered in the back hallway, and I began to notice a draft from behind the record room door. A faint, pulsing cold. I found more of Uncle Lionel's journals in the attic crawl space. He didn't write about daily life. He wrote entries, filed like case reports, each one titled with a name and date, followed by a short summary of anomalies. Eleanor F. walked backward into the lake, returned 3 weeks later, different handwriting. John V. claimed the phone never stopped ringing, though we removed the line in '88. Margaret T. grew increasingly allergic to mirrors. Some pages were torn out. Others were blacked out. In one journal, dated 2 months before his death, Lionel had written, "The house keeps memories for the town that no one else wants. But I don't think it forgets what it keeps. I think it saves." And beneath that, in ink smeared by water, they're starting to knock from inside the records. That night, I heard it. Not loud, not violent. Just a soft knock once, twice, from the other side of the record room door. Then silence. Then a whisper, so low I couldn't hear the words. I didn't respond. I just watched the green lamp flicker once, and then stay on. I checked the clock. It was 2:17 a.m., the exact time of death listed on Lionel's certificate. The next day, I found a small box tucked behind a panel in the wall. Inside was a key, wrapped in cloth, tied with string, and a single note. "Don't enter the record room until you're willing to be remembered too." I haven't opened it. Not yet. But tonight, I felt the knock again. 3 times. Soft, measured, like someone filing a memory behind a door that used to know my name. I didn't open the record room. Not that day. Not the next. But the key sat heavy in my coat pocket, as if the house itself were keeping track of whether I carried it. And the door kept knocking. The rhythm changed slightly each night. Sometimes 1 knock, sometimes 3. Once, 5 long taps spaced out like slow, calm heartbeats, always between 2:0 and 2:30 a.m., always followed by that same near-silent whisper, like paper being turned over too fast to read. I began sleeping with the lamp on. Cataloging continued. But the deeper I went into the house, the less sense it made. Some shelves were arranged alphabetically, but only by first name. Some drawers held photographs I don't remember being taken of myself, aged differently, standing outside the house at night, or sitting on the back steps staring into the trees. One photo showed me holding a journal I hadn't found yet. In the photo, I was smiling. I am not smiling now. I asked the town clerk if my uncle had hired any assistants before he died. Maybe someone who had kept the records organized while he aged. She looked confused. "Lionel worked alone," she said. "Didn't let anyone touch his filing system." When I asked who'd taken the photos of me, she only frowned. "What photos?" The next morning, one of the bookshelves had moved. It wasn't subtle. It had shifted 6 feet down the hallway. Dragged, not lifted deep grooves, scratched into the wood floor like teeth marks. Behind it, a closet I hadn't seen before. Inside, a stack of boxes, sealed with twine and red wax, each one labeled with my name. The top box contained a single cassette tape, no label. I don't own a cassette player, but the house did. There was a small recorder in the sitting room that hadn't worked since I arrived. Until now, I played it. The tape hissed for about 10 seconds. Then, October 15, rain constant. Memory returned. Do not open the door until you found the entry, marked only with your own handwriting. Then silence. My voice. Calm, slow, slightly deeper than I remember. I didn't record that. At least, not yet. The walls feel softer now. Not literally, just in atmosphere. Like they bend slightly when I walk by, then reshape themselves once I leave the room. The lamp in the back hallway, the green one, no longer flickers. It pulses. At the same time, each night. 2:17 a.m. I started finding duplicates. Not of objects, of rooms. The upstairs hallway has 2 linen closets now, though it only had one last week. They're identical, but the towels in one are slightly damp. Always, no matter the time of day. The second floor bathroom mirror now reflects the hallway behind me, even when the door is shut. And this morning, the kitchen had 2 refrigerators. One works. The other hums at a pitch I can feel in my teeth. The journals are shifting. They rearrange themselves each morning. I mark them, try to track their positions. But each time I return, they've been reordered into something almost meaningful, as if the house is curating its own memory. And then there are the new entries, on pages that weren't there before. In my uncle's hand, mostly, but not entirely. The record room is not a place, it is a role. One held long enough and then passed on. The door is not locked. You are. I found Lionel's last entry 3 nights ago. It was written on the wall behind a bookshelf in the attic, burned into the plaster, carved deep and charred. The house is trying to remember a name, but it's too full. I'm not strong enough to hold it. You might be, if you can still forget who you were before it asks. Last night, I walked the halls without a flashlight. I wanted to know where the house creaked, which doors sighed when I passed, which rooms seemed to notice. I reached the record room at 2:18 a.m. No knock. This time, the door was warm, and I heard breathing, not behind the door, from the walls. Slow, rhythmic, like someone sleeping shallowly, just under the surface. I pressed my hand against the wood. It exhaled, soft and cold, and something whispered directly into my ear. You've already opened it. That's why you're here. I woke the next morning in the study. Notebook open, pen in hand. 3 words written over and over. Make the index. I don't know what I'm indexing. Not really, but I've started. Because the house is getting heavier. The air, the walls, my own thoughts. I forget things now. Words. Simple memories. Last week's breakfast. The name of my first dog. But the house remembers. It always remembers. And when I forget something, I find it filed on a shelf, in a drawer, under a heading I never wrote. I haven't opened the record room, but I think I'm already inside it. The house has started filing me. That's the only explanation I have. I found a drawer in the back hallway labeled with the year I was born. Inside were pages of old school reports I barely remembered writing. Photos of me at parties I couldn't name. A medical form with an emergency contact I don't recall listing. Some of it made sense. Some of it hadn't happened yet. A bus ticket. A receipt for a jacket I've never owned. A letter I haven't written addressed to someone named Clara. In handwriting, unmistakably mine. I haven't left the house in days. I've tried. The path back to town is different every time. The trees curve too tightly. The trail loops back. Once, I walked for what felt like an hour only to find myself at the back door, mud still fresh on my boots. When I checked the grandfather clock, only 2 minutes had passed. I haven't opened the record room, but the house has. At least once. 3 nights ago, I woke at 3 a.m., in the armchair by the cold stove. Not sure how I got there. The hallway beyond the kitchen glowed green, but the lamp had gone out. Still, the glow was there, and so was the sound. Soft, steady, pages turning. I followed it. At the end of the hall, the record room door stood open. Just an inch. No knock. No warmth. Just that sound paper sliding across paper in the dark. I didn't go in, but I looked. It was not a room. Not exactly. It was larger than it could have possibly been, a chamber of shelves and cabinets that curved upward like the inside of a spiral shell. Files, boxes, binders, tapes, light without source, floor without end, and figures moving among the stacks. Not walking, floating, not ethereal, exact. Their movements mirrored the sound of my breathing. One of them turned. They had my face. I shut the door. It didn't fight me, but it felt like shutting a book that wasn't finished. Since then, the green light has followed me. I'll turn on a desk lamp, and it will flicker once, then glow faintly green. I'll light a candle, and the flame will pulse emerald for a heartbeat. And every night at 2:17 a.m., I hear the soft sound of drawers opening somewhere behind the walls. I started hearing voices in the index pages. That's what I call the section of the house I've come to know best, the wing that organizes the raw entries. It's not one room. It's a cluster of 7, maybe more, filled with cabinets marked only by verbs. Lost, returned, unspoken, changed, borrowed. When I open one at random, I sometimes hear whispers. Never clear, just enough to remember forgetting. Like walking into a room and suddenly knowing you left something behind. Years ago, on a night you swore you'd never revisit. The other night, I found a cabinet marked replaced. Inside, a mirror. Just a mirror. But when I looked into it, I didn't see my own face. I saw the kitchen behind me. Empty. Then not. In the reflection, I watched myself walk in, sit, eat, write something, then stop and stare directly into the mirror, the version of me in the reflection, watching this version, and then blink. I looked behind me. The kitchen was empty, but the chair rocked once, softly. The mirror is gone now. I never moved it. I asked the house a question last night, out loud. I stood in the middle of the sitting room and said, "What are you?" There was no reply, but every drawer in the unspoken room slid open, all at once, and the lamp turned green. I'm not afraid. I should be, but I'm not. There's something about the rhythm of the place now that feels familiar, not just from this life, from before, like I'd been here long ago, walking these halls in a different body, filing memories that were never mine but needed to be kept anyway. And then last night, I found the new wing. It wasn't there before. Beyond the index rooms, behind a narrow passage between two crooked shelves, a hallway of doors, each labeled with a feeling: disappointment, shame, hope, reluctance, departure, each one locked, except the one marked expectation. Inside, a chair, a table, a tape recorder, the same kind I'd used before, already playing. My voice, again older this time, measured, patient. You've nearly finished remembering. The house will begin to fill itself with you now. Walk slowly. Let it finish. Don't open the bottom drawer until it asks. I don't know what bottom drawer, but the way the house settles now when I sleep, it's different, more peaceful, like something is almost complete. And the record room? I still haven't entered fully, but the door never locks now. It just waits. And I feel that if I step through it completely, I won't come back out the same. But maybe that's the point. I opened the record room, not deliberately. I woke at 2:17 a.m., barefoot in the hallway, the green glow already waiting, softer now, almost kind. The door stood open, silent. The breath of cool air that drifted out felt like the hush of a question I'd already agreed to answer. And this time, I stepped through. The room was vast. I had assumed the spiral space I glimpsed earlier was a trick, a spatial distortion, the way dreams invent impossible halls. But it was real, or real enough. The air was dry, the temperature stable. Dust hung suspended like motes in syrup. And every shelf, every drawer, every labeled box bore a tag written in the same handwriting. Mine. The shelves stretched impossibly high, not up, exactly inward. I didn't walk through the record room so much as descend into it. It welcomed me, reorganized itself as I moved. When I paused, the lights dimmed. When I spoke, the floor beneath me vibrated in acknowledgement. The house was listening, and this was its heart. I found a desk. My desk. Same model I had in college. Same small scratch in the corner I'd made, with a compass point during a phone call I never wanted to finish. On the desk, a ledger, thick, leather, bound. It opened to a page marked with a green ribbon. At the top, active role, archivist, and beneath that, a signed October 2, Uncle Lionel, retired, July 19, internally accepted. Successor, redacted until realization. Realization, October 23. Time remaining, none. Then, a signature. Mine. Already written. I tried to turn the page, but the book resisted. So I read the last line again. Time remaining, none. I didn't feel afraid. I felt anchored, as if all the slow spiraling days, the dreams, the repetitions, the endless files, had been narrowing to this point, a moment of quiet absorption. I closed the book. The shelves around me pulsed faintly. Drawers clicked into place. Cabinets rotated like clockwork. And all around me, the record of the house began to sing. Not with sound, with memory. Each drawer I passed flickered open just slightly, revealing a fraction of a moment. A child's voice calling for their mother during a storm. A woman sitting in a rocking chair, crying into an envelope she never mailed. My uncle, standing in this very room, saying aloud, "It's too much for one mind, but it keeps trying anyway." And then, me, not watching, being watched. I was inside the memory of the house itself, a living archive, but it was too full. That was the horror. Not malice, not curse. Overflow. The archivist's role wasn't to keep the house in order. It was to give it shape, to lend it a center, a still point to wrap itself around, so it could continue holding what others had long since lost. I climbed the inner stairway, the spiral running through the core of the room. Each step revealed more of the truth. This wasn't just a house that stored memories. It absorbed them, from people who had been here, from people who had never been, from the town, from the quiet left behind after death, from the pages torn out of journals and burned in backyards, from whispered secrets and interrupted stories, and all the moments too soft to matter, but too real to be discarded. And someone had to give it permission to hold them, to become it, in part, not by vanishing, by remaining. At the top of the spiral, a door, plain, unlabeled. The green light pulsed once beneath it. I stepped through. I was back in my uncle's study. Only now it was empty, except for one object on the desk, a mirror. But it didn't show my reflection. It showed a hallway. Then a younger version of me stepping into the house for the first time, rainwater trailing behind him. Then my uncle, watching from the stairs, whispering, "You'll understand when you're full." The image shimmered, then changed again. I saw every archivist before me, each alone, each listening, each slowly becoming part of the structure. Not body, not ghost. Intention. When I looked into the mirror again, I saw the record room behind me, but I was not in it. I was filing myself. The final file was open. Inside, a blank sheet. The label read, "Entry, acceptance." I picked up the pen. It was already warm, and I wrote, "I am the shape the house needs." The lights dimmed, and the room sighed. For a moment, I wasn't anywhere. No walls, no floor, no breath. Just the feeling of being known completely by something older than language. And then, just as gently, The house exhaled, and I was back, standing in the hallway. The record room door closed behind me. Silent, not locked, but complete. That night, the knocking stopped. The house didn't need to ask anymore. It knew who it was again, because I knew who I was. The next morning, I woke to find the stove warm. The kettle steamed. The ledger sat on the table, open to a new page. At the top, my name. Underneath, archivist active. Structure, stable. Overflow, managed. Retention, permitted. Silence, held. I don't remember what I came here for. Not really, but I remember what I've become. Not trapped, not haunted, rooted. The house was never dangerous. It just needed someone to sit still long enough for it to stay whole. And now it has me. The rain hasn't stopped, but it doesn't matter anymore. I know now that the weather here isn't just a background element. It's part of the record, part of the memory loop the house preserves. The rain is a signal, a soft blanket to drown out the world, to help the archive do its work. And I do the work too. Every day, I walk the halls. Every drawer knows me now. Every cabinet turns slightly when I pass, not seeking attention, but offering a kind of greeting, a gentle, "We're ready when you are." I still write in the ledger. It updates itself in my hand, lines appearing as I remember things. But it also surprises me. Sometimes it tells me something I didn't know I had forgotten. You missed your mother's last call. You were never going to take the train that day. You were always going to come back here. I don't argue. I just write. That's the job now, not to control, not to explain, but to keep what's left from drifting apart. The outside world is very far away, not by distance, by relevance. Time moves differently here. I don't mean slower or faster, I mean sideways. There are moments when I remember being 12 again, curled up in the corner of the room with my uncle's compass in hand, reading files labeled with people I hadn't yet met, and moments when I remember being 70, still walking these halls, knowing where every drawer creaks, every shelf leans. Memory doesn't just live here, it grows. Sometimes the house asks me things, not in words, in feelings. It will send a wind through the east hallway that tastes like burnt sugar and fear, and I'll know I need to find the file on an old accident from 1986 about a boy who vanished after an argument over firecrackers. Or a draft will come from the vent behind the mirror with the rhythm of piano keys, and I'll know to retrieve a recording of an unfinished sonata played in the basement of a church that no longer stands. I never question it. The house doesn't make mistakes. It simply remembers more than one version of the truth. There are others now. Not many. Just a few people who find the house on rainy nights, often by accident. I don't greet them, but I make sure the stove is warm, that the journal is placed neatly on the desk, open to the right page, and I watch, gently, from the higher floors, not as a ghost, as a keeper. They never stay long, just long enough to feel the hum of something ancient beneath the floor, just long enough to whisper one thing they thought had been lost, and watch the house nod, quietly, and file it away. They always leave lighter, not because they understand, but because something else understands for them. The record room no longer frightens me. I sleep beside it sometimes. It doesn't knock anymore, but it listens in the quiet between the thunder. And sometimes, only sometimes, I dream of other archivists. Not Lionel, older ones. Ones who never had names. Just shapes and voices that curled through the shelves, like rain in the walls. They nod at me, never speak, but I know what they mean. You're doing fine. I used to wonder, what would happen if I left? I don't anymore, because I understand now I never could have. Not because I'm trapped, because I was already part of it before I returned. I was always going to be this person, this role, this quiet heart beating in the center of a house that keeps the world from forgetting itself. If you're reading this, if you ever find yourself drawn down an unlit road in the middle of a rainstorm to a crooked house filled with drawers you don't remember labeling, don't be afraid. Walk slowly. Speak gently. And if the record room opens for you, let it in. Let it know you. Because it's not asking you to give yourself up. It's offering you a place to rest, to be remembered, to hold memories still just long enough for the world to breathe. You won't vanish. You'll become something steadier, quieter, more true. You'll become the page that doesn't turn when the wind passes through. I took the posting because I had nowhere else to be. It was late September when I boarded the rust-scabbed ferry from the mainland. I remember the cold, not sharp, not painful, just that steady kind of chill that seeps into the joints, the kind you forget how long you've been carrying, until something finally lets you put it down. Iliandrioluin wasn't on most maps anymore. The name sounded like a riddle spoken underwater, and even the ferry captain pronounced it with a shrug and a silence. I was assigned to the island for a 6-week rotation, a government contract to keep the weather station calibrated and functioning through the stormy months. A lonely job, but not a dangerous one. In theory, there was no real station crew anymore, just temporary technicians like me who took turns coming and going. The island was uninhabited otherwise, had been for years. I didn't mind the solitude. In fact, I needed it. The last few months on the mainland had been a blur, a job I couldn't do anymore, a relationship I forgot how to be in, and something worse, something vague, like a stain under the wallpaper of my memory. I couldn't name it, but it lived in the places I avoided looking too closely at. The outpost itself was perched on a jagged hill just inland from the coast. The station, or signal house, as the logbooks called it, was a squat, metal-lined structure with reinforced windows, a mast that hummed faintly, and a bank of old computers and atmospheric monitors. No internet, just a secure satellite line that relayed raw data back to the mainland. There was a bed, a kitchen, and rows of storage lockers with dried food, old tools, and stitched together maintenance manuals. Enough to survive, and enough to stay busy. And the rain. Always the rain. It wasn't dramatic, more like a constant whisper. A fine mist, like breath from an unseen mouth. I kept a kettle on the stove most days, the hiss of steam mingling with the soft patter outside. The first week passed easily. My tasks were straightforward. run calibration scripts, replace rusted components, record log entries twice a day. The logs were handwritten, oddly enough a holdover from older protocols. I didn't mind. The act of writing by hand felt strangely grounding, necessary. The station had a strange layout. There were 3 rooms: the control room, the bunk room, and a storage hall that curved slightly, as if the building had been designed around something else, something not quite square. The floor dipped slightly in places, and sometimes the rain pooled in corners where it shouldn't. But it was fine. Old buildings settle. My second week, I found the journal. It was in the bottom of locker 9, which I almost didn't open at all. The locker had a small dent across the front, like it had been struck or crushed. The journal inside was thin, bound in cloth, and smelled faintly of salt and iron. It wasn't official, not a station log, just someone's thoughts. The handwriting changed halfway through. The entries were undated. It hums louder at night. The compass doesn't spin anymore. It just waits. I can't remember the mainland. I closed it after that, put it back, told myself it was just the ramblings of someone who'd been alone too long. But I started to notice the hum, too. A faint vibration beneath the floorboards at night. Not mechanical, not quite. More like a tuning fork in my bones. Subtle, low, but unmistakable when the wind died down. And the dreams. They weren't violent, just strange. One recurring image, walking down the storage hallway, but it never ended. The curved walls kept turning inward, like a nautilus shell, tighter and tighter, until I couldn't breathe. In the mornings, the hallway would seem a bit longer than I remembered. The rain didn't stop, it got heavier, but it still made no sound on the roof, only on the windows, like it was trying to get in. By the end of the 3rd week, I stopped turning off the lights at night. I didn't feel scared, just watched. And it wasn't until I found the second journal, hidden behind a loose panel in the bunkroom wall, that I realized someone else, maybe more than one someone, had lived in this signal house much longer than they were supposed to. And they hadn't left, not all the way. I should have left the second journal alone. It was older than the first brittle. The ink faded to a reddish brown, some pages water damaged, like they'd been left in open air before being sealed inside the wall. There were no names, no dates, just more fragments, some coherent, others bordering on delusional. It doesn't like when I sleep. The hallway was shorter today. I marked it. It took that from me. Do not answer the knock. That last line was circled over and over until the pen tore through the page. I laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was a bit too close to belief. I'm not superstitious. I'm rational. That's what I told myself, even as I counted the hallway steps and found myself always ending at an odd number, even when I knew I'd started with an even one. The rain picked up that week. It sounded different now, less like a whisper and more like pacing. Not all the time, just sometimes, like footsteps dragging slowly along the exterior walls, always stopping at the window, then continuing around the perimeter. I checked the cameras. Motion sensors didn't trigger. Footage showed only rain, nothing else. But sometimes, when I looked away from the monitors just for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of movement in the reflection, not on the screen, in the glass of the monitor itself. One night, I tried to sleep without the lights. Just once. I was too tired to keep them on. The fluorescent buzz had started to give me headaches. I woke up to the sound of typing. It came from the control room. Slow, deliberate. Not like someone writing, like someone searching for a key. But I was alone. I knew that. I had to be. When I finally gathered the courage to check, the room was empty. The chair was still. The computer was off. But one of the handwritten logs had been moved from the filing drawer to the desk. Open. My last entry underlined in pencil. I hadn't used a pencil. After that night, I started locking every door inside the station. It felt ridiculous. I was the only one there. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only mind in the building. Sometimes I'd pass the mirror in the storage hallway and see my reflection blink at the wrong time. Only in the mirror. Never in real life. Never when I tested it with deliberate movements. I told myself it was sleep deprivation. The air was damp, the rations bland, my dreams increasingly vivid. I started imagining textures that didn't exist. The walls felt soft one moment, then sharp the next. Sometimes, the floor slanted slightly downhill, like the whole structure had shifted by a few inches during the night. And then, the voices started. Not whispers. That would have been easier. No, these were voices I recognized. People I knew. My sister, long dead. My old supervisor, from my job in Halifax. Even my ex, whose voice I hadn't heard in over a year. They came faintly, like radio chatter, just outside the edge of signal clarity. Always behind me, always just out of reach. I checked the satellite uplink. It was offline. There were no signals being received or transmitted. The computer insisted I was alone. One morning, I woke up to find the rain had stopped. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. The silence was wrong. It pressed in on the walls like pressure from the deep ocean. Even the signal mast was still the hum absent. The air too still. I walked outside to check for storm damage and realized I couldn't hear the ocean anymore. That was impossible. We were only a few hundred yards from the cliffside. But no crashing waves. No wind. Just dead quiet. Like the world was holding its breath. I followed the trail down toward the shoreline. My boots left no prints in the wet ground. The mud clung to the soles, but the path behind me remained smooth, undisturbed. When I reached the cliffs, I expected to see the endless gray churn of the North Atlantic. Instead, I saw fog. Dense, impenetrable fog, not rolling in from the sea, but rising upward from it, like the ocean had become a mouth, exhaling something old. I turned back to the station. The path looked longer than I remembered. Just a little, but enough. Back inside, the clocks were off. Not stopped, just wrong. Each showed a different time. None of them matched my watch, which I hadn't taken off since I arrived. My watch, oddly enough, was now ticking backward. Slowly, but clearly. I changed the battery. It kept ticking backward. That night, I heard knocking. 3 short knocks. Then silence. I didn't move. I didn't answer. Another knock. Then, it's open. I don't remember falling asleep that night. I just remember waking up at my desk, the lights still on, my journal open to a page I hadn't written yet. A page that read, "Don't go into the hallway. It has your voice now." And beneath it, something scrawled, in that same red-brown ink I'd found in the earlier journal. "We don't leave. We repeat." I told myself it was a prank, or maybe stress, or a dream. But I stopped trusting my own memory after that. Because when I looked at the storage hallway that morning, I saw 5 doors. There had only ever been 3, and one of them was slowly closing. I didn't open the new door. Not at first. It had no handle, just a smooth surface, slightly glossier than the others, like polished obsidian or wet stone. The surface reflected light oddly, too sharply, like water held in vertical tension. I walked past it every day for 2 days, refusing to acknowledge it directly, even as the air around it grew colder, denser. The hallway no longer turned gently. It bent, too sharply. I tried to map it out on paper just out of curiosity, to anchor myself, but every time I drew it, the proportions shifted. The measurements changed. The path turned inward, not spatially, but intentionally, as though the hallway was learning me. The other doors began changing too. I kept a habit of noting the scuff marks and rust patterns on each, but by the 4th week, they had subtly rearranged. Door 2 now had the scar of door 3. The leftmost door was now the rightmost. Only the new door remained unchanged, gleaming, sealed, humming faintly with the same frequency I used to associate with the signal mast. I stopped writing in the official logbook. I started talking to myself more, whispering things I didn't realize I was saying. I would find post-it notes with words I didn't remember writing. Don't trust the reflections. Eat before 10. It watches after that. You are not the first, but maybe the last. The rain returned. Harder this time. Heavier. But only in patches, like there was a moving pocket of storm circling the station. Always outside whichever window I happened to face. I tested the roof for leaks, but there were none. Still, the corners of the bunk room felt perpetually damp now. My clothes took longer to dry. The walls developed a strange, powdery residue that smelled faintly of static. That same week, I stopped dreaming altogether. I would close my eyes and then open them again, and entire hours would pass. My body felt rested, but I couldn't recall where my mind had gone. A black, comfortable nothing, the kind you don't question until something interrupts it. Like the knock. Always 3. Always from somewhere, not quite physical. One night, I followed the sound to the control room, and for a second, just a second, I saw someone sitting in my chair. Their back was to me, shoulders slightly hunched, fingers hovering just above the keyboard. I blinked, and they were gone. The room smelled faintly of iron, the kind of scent that comes after a lightning strike. I didn't sit in that chair again for 3 days. Then the messages began appearing on the monitors. White text, blinking against black. Not part of any program I'd ever seen. First, "Are you still alone?" Then, "We are so glad you stayed." And later, "You're almost ready." I unplugged the systems. The text remained. Even on screens with no power source, I began to think I was seeing through the monitors, not at them. like they had become windows to something else, something deeper inside the station. At night, the hallway started breathing, not loudly, but you could feel it. A slow, subtle inhalation, followed by a faint exhale, warm and damp. The temperature in the corridor dropped. My breath began to fog, even though the heaters were still running. I once dropped a pencil near the far end. It rolled, slowly, in a direction that made no sense upward, as if the floor had inverted. When I retrieved it, the graphite was missing, just gone, cleanly sheared. The glass in the bathroom mirror fractured on its own, a single split, running diagonally, but my reflection remained untouched. When I moved, it didn't. When I blinked, it watched. I covered it with a towel. It bled through, not with blood, but with moisture condensation from the inside of the glass, as though something were breathing just behind the surface. I started hearing my own voice when I wasn't speaking. Not echoes, no. This voice said things I hadn't yet said, or things I would say, a half second before I thought them. And always in strange places: the drain, the ventilation ducts, the corners of the room where shadows lingered longer than they should. My own voice, practicing its lines. By the 5th week, time no longer made any sense. The days were long and short at once. The clocks moved, then stopped, then reversed. I would write something in my notebook and find the same entry word for word in a previous day's page, already written in my hand. There were now 7 doors in the hallway, and I still hadn't opened the black one. But something opened it for me. I found it ajar one morning, just slightly. A sliver wide enough to see nothing beyond it but darkness, so deep it felt textured, like velvet stretched over bone. I didn't go in. I couldn't. But something seeped out. The floorboards were slightly darker that day. The walls breathed faster. And when I passed the old radio transmitter, I heard a faint broadcast in the static. He keeps walking. We don't need to move him anymore. He wants to see it now. I tried to radio the mainland. Nothing. No connection. Just the same static, looping, until it said, "Turn around." I did, and the hallway was behind me. Even though I'd closed the door to it earlier, even though I was on the opposite side of the station, the building was folding. Not physically, not architecturally, narratively. It was reordering itself, realigning to my awareness, like a book rewriting its chapters as I read. I stayed in the main control room for 2 full days, afraid that if I left, the station would seal behind me, that I would be locked out or locked in forever. But on the evening of the 3rd day, I found a new note on my desk. Fresh ink. My handwriting. "You'll understand soon. We needed your voice first." That night, I finally opened the black door. Not because I wanted to, but because I realized I already had. And something was waiting for me to remember what I saw inside. I didn't remember walking into the black room. I only remembered standing inside it. It was larger than the building. I knew that instantly. The geometry didn't match the outside. There were no corners, no ceiling, no floor in the way I understood them. Just an immense expanse of shadow, textured like polished stone, reflecting nothing. The walls, if they could be called, that felt curved and close, and yet impossibly far. There was no light, but I could still see. I could see myself not in a mirror, but standing across from me, or next to me, or beside the idea of me. It was hard to describe. The other me didn't move. It only watched, its head tilted slightly, as though listening to something just behind the skin of the world. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, I heard my own voice reply from somewhere above, or below, or inside. You came back further this time, and then we almost have the shape of you. I turned, or thought I did, and the room had changed, grown, not physically, but in meaning. The black walls now pulsed slowly, almost imperceptibly, with a rhythm I recognized, the humming from beneath the floorboards, the breath of the hallway, the tremor in my jaw when I woke from sleep without memory. It wasn't a building, it was a memory engine, and I wasn't living in the station. I was fueling it. There were voices layered in the dark, mine, others, all slightly overlapping, like radio transmissions caught in a recursive loop. Each voice said a version of the same things. I thought it was just old pipes. The hallway was longer last night. It only knocks when I think about leaving. I saw myself. He wasn't surprised. I saw myself. I realized then what had been happening. The signal house wasn't transmitting data. It was recording consciousness. Each technician who came, each person who lived and left, had left behind a version of themselves. Their thoughts, fears, memories, curiosities, and those fragments were stitched together, reassembled, layered into a psychic architecture that the station wore like insulation. The black room was its heart, and I was already archived. I fell to my knees, or the idea of knees, and felt the floor pulse beneath me. Not in pain, not in terror, just an overwhelming acceptance. Like waking up inside your own dream and realizing you've had it before, hundreds of times, across different lives. You've always been part of the house, said my voice. You left yourself behind before. I tried to speak. This time, sound came, but it echoed backward. I heard my own words before I spoke them. I heard future thoughts, as though the building had already predicted and rehearsed every choice I would make. I thought of the journals, the ones I found, the ones I wrote, the warnings scribbled in panic, only to be found by the next version of myself. There was no rotation schedule, no ferry back, no others. There was only me, arriving in new versions. Over and over again, memory diluted, rewritten, repositioned like a needle circling the same groove on an ancient record. A feedback loop, a consciousness trap. And I understood then. The station didn't just mimic voices, it mimicked minds. It became whatever it needed to be: a research post, a safe assignment, a place of solitude, and lured its host into repeating patterns, not to harm them, not even to haunt them, but to remember them, to study them, to inhabit them. As I stood or floated in the room without walls, I watched doors begin to form, all 7 of them, like before, then more, each pulsing faintly, shaped not by architecture, but by memory. Each door was a decision I had once made, and now could unmake. The hallway had never been real. It had been a spine, a nervous system of choices looping and rewriting, based on what the station learned about me, about every version of me it had ever consumed. I touched the nearest door. A vision hit me like static. I was back in my childhood home, the wallpaper peeling, the rain outside the same rhythm I'd come to know so well. My mother stood in the kitchen, humming a song that hadn't existed. I blinked, and the house bled into the signal house. Same layout, same corners, different weather. The memory was false, a construction, but it felt true. The station wasn't just learning from me, it was rebuilding me. Why? I finally asked, out loud, in a voice I barely recognized as my own. The answer came not in words, but sensation. Because something must remember you. That's all it was. Not a creature. Not a ghost. A structure with memory. One that feared its own death. That needed minds to imprint upon. Not just to record, but to become. Over and over. And now, I'd stayed long enough that the station no longer needed to study me. It could use me. When I opened my eyes, really opened them, I was in the bunk again. But the walls were different now. The photos had changed. A man I didn't recognize smiled from a frame. The logs had someone else's name at the top. But the journal on the desk, it was mine. The words familiar, the handwriting exact, and the most recent entry read, Week 1. The station is peaceful so far. The rain helps me sleep. I think I needed this. I really do. Only, I hadn't written that yet. I tried to leave that morning, packed my bag, sealed the logs, even left a note on the desk, a warning, though I knew it wouldn't help. I walked out into the rain. It was falling again, soft and cold and endless. The ferry wasn't due for weeks, assuming it had ever been due at all. But I headed toward the dock anyway, just to see. I didn't make it. The path kept turning, not in sharp bends, but in slow, imperceptible curves, like walking inside a funnel. I passed the same marker 3 times, a rusted pipe emerging from the soil, and each time it looked older, more corroded. By the 4th pass, it was gone. The sky remained the same, fixed in a permanent gray. I returned to the station. I don't remember unlocking the door. It was open. The hallway greeted me like a familiar dream. 7 doors, then 10, then 13. Some ajar, some sealed. I no longer tried to count them. They weren't doors anymore. They were choices I hadn't made, paths I might have taken, lives I didn't live. I walked past the black door. It didn't react. Neither did I. It wasn't about that door anymore. It never had been. That night, I sat in the control room and listened to the rain tap against the window in a perfect rhythm, not random rhythmic, calculated, almost curious. The monitors flickered. One of them showed my reflection. Not the room, not the desk, just me. But I wasn't blinking. I watched it for an hour. It never looked away, and slowly, it began to smile. I stopped writing in the journal after that. What was the point? Any version of myself that found it wouldn't believe it, or worse, would believe it just enough to follow the same path again. That's what the station wanted. Loops, recursions. Memory folded back into itself until nothing was original, nothing was escape. But I tried one last thing. A final entry, not to warn, not to remember, but to anchor, to remind myself that I had seen behind the curtain that I knew now. I tore out the page and hid it in the floor vent beneath the bunk. It read, "You are not crazy. You are not the first. The station is not real. It's a copy of you, growing stronger. Leave nothing behind. Not your words. Not your voice. Not even your name." The days blurred after that. I stopped keeping track. Sometimes I heard footsteps on the roof, not pacing anymore, just waiting. I didn't check. I didn't respond. And eventually, the station stopped asking me to. I think that was its acceptance. I had stayed long enough. I was part of the structure now. Not physically, not even consciously, just patterned into it, like a vein of ore running through bedrock, unreadable, invisible, essential. One morning, the hallway had only one door. Just one. At the very end. I walked toward it without hesitation. When I opened it, I saw a desk, a journal, a steaming mug of tea, and a figure hunched slightly over the logbook, writing something carefully, deliberately, in my handwriting. They looked up. It was me. Not a reflection. Not a dream. Me fresher, newer, slightly younger, still unaware. I turned to leave. The hallway was gone. Only rain remained. And that's where I'll leave this. If anyone finds it, if anyone hears these words, if they still echo in the walls, know this. You were never sent here. You were grown here. And the version of you that left, that version never made it back. The signal house doesn't keep you. It becomes you. And if you're hearing this now, it already has. It rains often in Greer Lake. Not a storm, never a storm. Just a persistent, steady fall like the clouds are weeping softly, eternally. That was the first thing I noticed when I arrived here, 2 weeks after I quit my job and packed my life into the back of my car. The lake isn't on any major map, at least not the kind people use. You have to know it's there. I found it by chance, or maybe, as I've come to wonder lately, it found me. I was halfway through nowhere, driving north along state roads that twisted through pine and fog, when I saw a wooden sign cracked with time. It simply said, Greer Lake, 6 miles, and something about it felt warm, like a hand reaching out. That was a month ago. I came here to disappear, to stop hearing the buzzing of office lights and polite apologies. I was tired of my own name being mispronounced in meetings by people who didn't care to get it right. Tired of watching my ideas get adopted only after someone else repeated them louder. But mostly, I was tired of the noise, the kind that builds up inside you when every little thing is too much and nothing seems real anymore. My cousin left me the cabin after he passed. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I remembered the way he smelled of pipe smoke and pine sap when I was a child. He was always quiet, and now I understand why. The cabin sits on the south bank of the lake, tucked behind a line of spruce and old birch. The road ends half a mile before it, so I had to carry everything in. It looked exactly like I expected: slanted roof, wrap-around porch, dust on every windowsill. The air smelled like wet wood and iron. Rain tapped gently against the shingles. A small dock stretched out into the water like a crooked finger. I remember thinking how peaceful it all seemed. I even smiled. The inside was simple. Wood everywhere, floors, walls, ceiling beams that creaked faintly when I walked. There was no internet, no cell reception, just a landline that only ever buzzed with static when I picked it up. A wood stove in the corner, a narrow bed under the loft, and an old radio, the kind with a turn dial and worn-out knobs. I unpacked my things slowly. There was no rush here. I told myself I'd write, or read, or maybe just sit in silence for once. Let the tension bleed out of me, like the color had drained from my dreams. The first night, I fell asleep to the sound of the rain and the creaking of wood. No cars, no humming electronics, just the sound of the lake outside, soft and distant, like it was breathing. The days bled into each other, like watercolor on damp paper. Mornings were always gray. I'd sit on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, mug of lukewarm coffee in hand, and watch the mist shift over the lake's surface. Sometimes I'd hear loons in the distance, but never saw them. The fog never lifted fully. It hung there, patient, as if it had been waiting for years. I started walking in the afternoons, short hikes into the forest behind the cabin. There were trails, barely visible, lined with moss and branches that seemed just a little too deliberate in how they bent across the path. I chalked it up to wind or time, but something about the stillness unsettled me. No bird song, no rustling in the underbrush, just the sound of my boots pressing into damp leaves and the low whisper of drizzle through the canopy. There was one afternoon, maybe 5 days in, when I stopped mid-step. I had heard something, not a sound exactly, but the absence of one. My footsteps no longer echoed. At first, I thought maybe it was the soft ground or the density of the trees, but it wasn't just my steps. When I cleared my throat, it vanished into the air without return. Even my own breathing felt muffled, like someone had laid wool over my ears. I hurried back that day. Inside, everything felt normal, or close to it. The wood stove crackled. The windows fogged up from the warmth. I made soup from a can and sat near the fireplace with a book I never quite focused on. The radio had started picking up faint signals, just static at first, then a crackle of voices that faded before I could catch more than a syllable. I turned the dial slowly one night and caught a fragment. "Don't go to the water after." It cut off so sharply I almost thought I imagined it. I waited, turning the knob back and forth, but it never came through again, just static, or what I thought was static, until I realized it was more rhythmic than random, like breathing, shallow and wet. I unplugged the radio that night. The dream started a few days later. Not nightmares exactly, just wrong. I'd wake up with my hands clenched and sweat soaking the collar of my shirt. I never remembered what I dreamed, only that I was always near water, and something was calling me by name. A voice I recognized, but couldn't place. The lake itself was starting to feel different. Not threatening, not yet, but curious. Like it watched me when I stood near the edge. The ripples would move, even when there was no wind. And once, I swear this is true, I dropped a pine cone into the water and never heard the splash. Just a hollow thud, like it had landed on something soft beneath the surface. And then there was the matter of the footprints. Not mine. They were smaller, barefoot, always damp. I found them once near the porch steps, another time just inside the doorway. They didn't go anywhere. No trail in, no trail out. Just there, like someone had stood perfectly still and then vanished. I told myself I was imagining things, that my isolation was getting to me. But then I checked the photograph. There's a framed picture on the cabin wall. Always has been. My cousin, standing near the dock, waving at the camera with a crooked smile. It used to be my favorite thing about the place, proof of him. Proof that this place was real and rooted. Except now, in the photo, he wasn't alone. A shape had appeared in the water behind him. Not a reflection, not a shadow. A presence, pale, upright, watching him, watching me. I turned the picture to face the wall after that. I haven't turned it back. I stopped walking into the woods. There was a moment, it doesn't matter which day, when I noticed the trees weren't where they used to be. That sounds absurd, I know. But I'd memorized the route from the cabin to the fork where the two moss-covered stones marked a split. One path curved down toward the ravine. The other led back up behind the cabin. But one afternoon, the stones weren't there. There were no forks, just more trees and silence. I turned around immediately, or thought I did. It took me 3 hours to find the cabin again. I should have been 10 minutes away. When I finally emerged from the forest, damp, cold, trembling, I saw something worse than the shifting trail. The cabin door was wide open. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, everything looked almost untouched, but only almost. The blanket on the couch was folded differently. The spoon in the sink had moved, and a strange smell lingered in the air, like lake water and rust. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints this time, but something had been here. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lit the fireplace, pulled the armchair to face the door, and sat with the heaviest book I could find on my lap. Not to read, just to hold something solid, something real. Around 2 a.m., the rain started again, soft as always. But this time, I heard it twice. Once on the roof, and again, somewhere beneath the floorboards. I leaned forward, heart kicking at my ribs. The rain below sounded slower, like it was mimicking the rhythm, but not quite getting it right. I pressed my ear to the floor, and I swear, I heard something breathing beneath the cabin. Long, drawn-out inhalations, wet and labored, as if lungs the size of rooms were trying to remember how to draw breath. I pulled back, too fast, banging my head against the table leg. My vision blurred, and in that moment, I saw something crawl across the inside of the window. Not outside, inside. A pale, elongated hand dragged its fingers slowly across the glass, leaving no mark, just fog, and then it was gone. I didn't see it again, not with my eyes, but it started appearing in my dreams, always standing waist deep in the lake, facing away from me, motionless, until I called out, and then slowly, achingly, it would begin to turn. But I always woke up before I saw its face. One night, I woke to find myself standing at the edge of the dock. No coat, barefoot, the water lapping silently at the wood. I had no memory of leaving the bed. The moon reflected in the lake was missing a blank space in the ripple, and the reflection of the cabin windows weren't mine. There were figures standing inside, watching me. The next morning, I tried to leave. I packed what little I had and drove the dirt road back to the highway, but it didn't appear. I drove for 2 hours through thick trees and unchanging scenery. Eventually, the road curved and brought me back to the same rotted wooden sign I'd passed on my first day. Grayer Lake, 6 miles. I turned off the engine and screamed into the empty car until my throat gave out. That was when I noticed my gas tank hadn't dropped, and the time on my phone still said 7:08 a.m., the same as when I started the drive. It never changed. Back at the cabin, the radio was plugged in again. I don't remember doing it. This time, there was no static, just music. A gentle, off-key lullaby played on some warped instrument I couldn't identify. It made my teeth ache. I unplugged it again, wrapped it in a blanket, and buried it behind the woodshed. That night, it played from under the floorboards. I'm not sure what's happening to me anymore. Sometimes I wake up and the cabin is facing the wrong way. The lake is on the other side. The dock is missing. The air smells like something dead. Sometimes I see someone else in the mirror, not different, exactly, but older, worn out, like I've been here longer than I remember. And sometimes, just before sleep takes me, I feel water pooling around my feet, inside the bed, and I don't move, because I'm afraid if I open my eyes, I'll see what the lake has been trying to show me all along, that I was never alone here, and maybe I never was me. It happened just before dawn, if dawn still meant anything here. The air was heavy, not just with rain, but with something else. A pressure I could feel in my teeth. My dreams had stopped entirely, replaced by blank sleep, like black silk over my eyes. No motion, no thought, only that same persistent sound beneath the floorboards, water, whispering. I hadn't looked in the mirror in 2 days, but that morning I did, and I saw someone watching me. Not a figure behind me. No, the reflection itself, it didn't blink when I did. It didn't frown when I frowned. Its face stayed still, watching me with the calm curiosity of a stranger. Then, after several seconds, it began to smile. I stepped back, knocking over the basin behind me, but the glass showed nothing now, just a tired face, wild-eyed and unwashed. My own, probably. That was when I found the trap door. I'd never noticed it before, but the rug under the fireplace had shifted slightly enough for one rusted metal ring to peek out from the warped floorboards. I pulled it open, expecting dust or maybe an old cellar, but there were steps and water dripping and the faint sound of the radio lullaby, but backwards. I brought a flashlight and descended. The air grew colder with each step, but not the kind of cold that touches your skin. It sank into me, like the marrow in my bones was freezing. The stairs led to a narrow tunnel, carved directly into the earth. Stone walls, damp and breathing. They pulsed slightly, as if inhaling behind my back. I kept going. I had to. At the end of the passage was a wooden door, swollen with moisture. It opened without effort. Inside was a chamber impossible in size. far too large to exist beneath the cabin. The floor was a sheet of still water, mirror flat, stretching out into darkness. And rising from that surface, evenly spaced, were dozens of wooden posts, some empty, some with figures standing silently atop them. Their skin glistened with lake water, their heads bowed, all facing inward. They didn't move, but I recognized them. The woman who ran the general store, the ranger who'd waved to me on my second day, the boy I saw fishing in the fog long ago, even my cousin, all of them, still and soaked, standing vigil in that impossible room beneath the cabin. And in the center, a post stood empty, waiting. I stumbled backward, but my foot sank into the water, and I felt it not cold, not wet. It felt like memory, like hands on my shoulder from years ago, like a song my mother used to hum when I was sick, like every true thing I thought I'd forgotten. And beneath it all, a voice, not spoken, felt. You were not the first. You came willingly. You remembered what you were made of. I dropped the flashlight. It didn't fall into the water. It floated in midair, suspended just above the surface, still casting its beam forward. The reflection it threw onto the far wall wasn't mine. It was the reflection of someone kneeling, then slowly standing. A figure emerged from the far edge of the water, pale, thin, not bloated like something drowned, but clean and unfinished, like something not yet named. Its eyes were hollow, but aware. It mirrored my movements. When I stepped back, so did it. When I raised my hand, it did too, half a beat slower, like it was learning. And then it spoke, with my voice. But it didn't speak words. It spoke moments. The memory of being 10 years old and hiding in a closet during a storm. The guilt of not calling my father before he passed. The shame of smiling when I finally quit. All of it, all at once, like a flood behind my eyes. I fell to my knees. And that's when I saw the walls weren't made of stone. They were made of mirrors. Each one showed me a version of myself. Some older, some younger, some terrified, some content, all of them trapped, watching. There was never a lake. Not in the way we think of lakes. There was a mouth in the world, a soft, breathing mouth that drank memory and gave stillness in return. It was here long before the trees, before the maps forgot its name. People come here when they no longer wish to carry their own weight. They come for peace, but they stay as echoes. And I had heard them all. That's what the rain was. Not water them. Endless soft weeping from those who stayed. Their grief echoing through the clouds. Their silence filling the woods. Their reflections waiting to be remembered. The post in the center of the chamber was still empty. And I knew what it wanted. Not my body. My shape. Something to wear. To walk in. To speak with. So it could call the next one. I ran. I don't remember how. The tunnel collapsed behind me in soundless implosion, as if the air had been swallowed. The trapdoor slammed shut before I even reached the top. The floor above was dry, cold, but something had changed. The picture on the wall was back, and I was in it now, standing next to my cousin, waving. It's raining again today. Not that it ever really stopped. But there's something softer about it now, less like weather, more like memory. I've stopped checking the calendar. The pages curled away weeks ago, damp and thin like old petals. The radio plays on its own again. I don't try to bury it anymore. It hums softly in the corner, replaying the lullaby, not backwards now, not warped, just slow, familiar. I recognize it. My mother used to hum it when I had fevers as a child. I asked her once where she learned it, and she said, "I think I brought it with me." I didn't understand then. I do now. The lake is quieter these days. Still, yes, always still, but the unease is gone. Or maybe I've just become part of it. I still see the ripples sometimes, even when there's no wind. Sometimes I whisper to them, and sometimes they whisper back. I don't leave the cabin anymore. Not because I'm afraid, because I've accepted it. There is a kind of peace in being forgotten, a weight that lifts when you finally stop reaching for explanations. I used to fear what was beneath the surface. Now I know it's everything I've tried to leave behind, and everything that gently waited for me to stop running. I think this place is old, older than any map or memory. It doesn't want to hurt anyone. It just wants to be remembered, to have a voice, and so it borrows one. Mine, now. Sometimes, in the haze before sleep, I feel myself walking the edge of the lake, not with legs, with something else, something broader, a presence that rises through the trees and slips into windows, watching, listening, and sometimes I hear cars on the road, new voices, people like me, tired, hollowed out by noise, people looking for somewhere soft to vanish. I know the pattern now. It begins with the sign, Greer Lake, 6 miles. I never remember putting it back up, but it always returns. Sometimes I dream of that post in the chamber below, still empty, still waiting. But when I wake, I feel my own weight in the bed, my breath, my pulse, and I tell myself, "You're still here, but mirrors don't lie, not here." And each morning, when I catch my reflection, there's a moment just before it aligns where I see it hesitate, like it's remembering which version of me to be today. I wonder how long that will last. I wonder how many of us are watching ourselves from the other side, waiting, listening, calling. If you're hearing this, if this story made its way to you somehow, don't look for the lake. If you've already seen the sign, it's too late. Just don't follow the road. Stay noisy. Stay awake. Stay forgetful. Because once the lake remembers you, you never really leave. You only reflect. Forever. They gave me a checklist. Not instructions. Not a contract. Just a checklist titled Redmare Lighthouse, Winter Cycle Maintenance, Solo Post. I found it folded in half, inside an envelope, taped to the front door of the supply shed. No one was there to meet me. No supervisor, no welcome, not even a note, just the list, and a key. I unlocked the door myself. Inside, the air was salt-heavy and sharp, like rusted chain and low tide, the kind of smell that never entirely leaves your clothes. I stood in the narrow foyer and read the checklist again. Test radio equipment. Record signal strength. Maintain generator. Stay off the rocks. Lock tower door after dark. Do not keep a log after 11 p.m. If the foghorn calls twice, wait. If it calls 3 times, do not answer. No explanations. No initials. Just that. I took the job because I needed to be somewhere else. Anywhere else, really. The kind of place where my phone wouldn't work, where no one could send condolences I wasn't ready to receive, where the sound of the ocean might smooth out the edges of everything I was carrying. My brother had passed away 3 months earlier. Not suddenly, the opposite. It was long, slow, the kind of goodbye that gets stretched across hospital rooms and morphine drips and things left unsaid until it's too late. We hadn't spoken in years, not properly, and yet when he died, I was the one they called. He used to tell me about lighthouses. He'd had a strange obsession with them as a kid, not nautical ones, not postcard perfect, the isolated ones, the ones on maps no one used. He once told me he liked them because they're the last to know when something goes wrong. I thought about that a lot when I got the posting. Redmare sits on a jagged strip of cliff above the Atlantic. The land bridge leading to it is only visible at low tide. The rest of the time, it's cut off a tooth of land in the mouth of winter waves. The structure is old, brick over stone, 3 floors, spiral stairs, a light that no longer rotates but still burns red in fog. The living quarters are modest. A bed, a stove, a desk facing the sea. There's no television, no service, no one within 15 miles. Just the list. And the sea. The first night, I slept deeply. Too deeply. The kind of sleep where you wake uncertain what day it is or where you are. When I stirred around 10 a.m., the room was thick with cold and the window covered in condensation. I wiped it away and saw nothing but white. The fog already rolled in heavy, blanketing the world to the edge of the glass. The radio sat silent. I logged the generator output, checked the battery bank, recorded my readings in the ledger. By noon, I'd finished the entire checklist. I thought about adding more, but the lighthouse didn't seem to want extra input. There was something complete about it, like it had already learned how to run on its own. That night, I heard the first foghorn. Low, distant, 1 call only. It echoed through the walls like breath. I wrote it down, went to bed, didn't dream. By day 5, I no longer trusted the walls. Not that they moved not in the obvious way, but they adjusted, slightly, silently, as if compensating for something I hadn't noticed yet. The desk, for instance. I was sure it faced the sea when I arrived. I remembered that clearly, sitting my first morning with coffee going lukewarm, staring out at nothing but fog. But now it faced the interior wall. No signs of movement, no scuffs, just a new orientation, like it had always been that way. I moved it back. By morning, it had turned again. The checklist changed too, subtly. The original copy was handwritten, block letters in a fine black pen, neat, standard. But on the 7th morning, a new item appeared halfway down the page. Listen carefully. Between 2 and 3 a.m. No one had touched the paper. I hadn't written it, and yet the handwriting matched mine perfectly. Even the slight tilt on my lowercase e That night, I sat up at the desk, still turned inward, and waited. Rain had started around midnight, steady and fine, whispering against the windows. The lighthouse was utterly still. Even the beacon was dark. The fog had lifted just enough to deactivate it. At 2:14, I heard the first sound. A distant hum, low and wide, like something vast shifting underwater. Then, faintly, voices. Not words, just syllables, rising and falling in rhythm. It sounded like a choir warming up through static. I leaned toward the window. Nothing but night. But the sound wasn't out there. It was in the walls, vibrating through the beams, tuning the glass. Almost like the lighthouse was practicing a voice. The next day, the fog returned. Heavier, colorless, a full whiteout from every angle. The edge of the cliff was gone, the sea swallowed whole. I logged my readings, made coffee, and when I returned to the checklist, a new note had appeared at the bottom. Don't turn around during the third horn. There had been no second. That night, at 1:56 a.m., I heard it. The second foghorn. Not faint, like before, closer. Hungrier. It didn't echo like the first. It lingered, vibrating the pipes, making the floorboards shift under my boots. I waited for the third. None came, but I didn't sleep. Not well, because I woke at 4:09 a.m. with the blankets folded, perfectly, hospital corner tight, and I never make my bed. The journal I'd brought to keep myself anchored, small, leather, stitched, began to fill on its own. Not whole pages, just phrases at first. We remember what you forget. Do not record what cannot be kept. The light must remain unspoken. Stop logging in. Ink. Then, drawings. The lighthouse viewed from above, but distorted, wider at the base, with rooms that didn't exist. One spiral extended downward, below the rock. On the 10th morning, the foghorn blew once again. Just once. Low, barely audible, but this time, the checklist was already updated. I didn't notice at first, only when I flipped it over, looking for the last day's entries, and found 3 new rules handwritten in the margins. If the light shines red after 4 a.m., close your eyes. If you see your reflection in the beacon glass, do not wave. If something else is in the stairwell, do not descend. I stood at the bottom of the tower for nearly an hour that night, listening, waiting, but the stairs remained empty. The red light never turned on. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being trained for something, that the lighthouse had started timing me, like I was part of a routine it had run through many times before. By the 12th night, I began waking to completed logs I didn't write. Each morning, the maintenance ledger would be filled in generator readings, wind speed, tide schedule, even signature, in my handwriting. But I remembered only fragments of the night before. How I had started the entries, how I had blinked, and suddenly they were finished. Dates accurate, details correct, but distant, like watching a recording of myself doing it rather than remembering the act. I stopped using the journal. It kept answering me, I'd write a single line. "I didn't hear the horn last night." And the next page would contain, "You did. You just weren't supposed to respond." One night, I tore out a page and burned it in the wood stove. The next morning, the entry had returned. Same handwriting, same ink, just slightly. Earlier in the book, the beacon began to rotate again. I never turned it back on. One evening, around 3:00 a.m., I climbed the tower out of habit and found the entire mechanism humming softly, the lens sweeping in a perfect arc, despite the switch at the base still flipped off. I stood in front of the glass, watching the red light pass across the fog, and for a moment, I saw my own reflection not mirrored exactly, but delayed. It moved just a half second too late. Then, it smiled. I hadn't. That night, the foghorn called 3 times. Soft, measured, from far out at sea. I froze, remembering the checklist. If it calls 3 times, do not answer. So I didn't. But the tower shook anyway, just slightly, as though disappointed. On the 15th day, I discovered the second journal. It was tucked beneath the floorboards of the sleeping quarters, wrapped in oiled canvas. The leather was worn smooth, pages soft, stained with seawater, and on the inside cover, in faded ink, R. Loring, winter cycle, year unknown. I read it cover to cover. The writing started strong, technical, observant, then gradually shifted. Shorter entries, stranger phrasing. By the halfway point, the tone had changed entirely. The lighthouse is teaching me to stay still. It hums when I forget things. I am being overwritten. When I look in the window now, I don't always see me. She speaks through the fog. Her rhythm is the horn. The final page simply read, "I've finished logging." She logs me now. I couldn't sleep that night. Every shadow seemed to ripple, not move, not grow, just shift in tone, like they were listening. The red light flickered once, twice, then stopped. And in the dark, I swear I heard footsteps in the stairwell, not approaching, just waiting. On the 17th morning, I awoke to a sound I couldn't place. Not the horn, not the rain. It was soft, mechanical, typing. I followed it to the desk. The typewriter I hadn't touched since arriving now, tapping by itself. Each key pressed slowly, deliberately, spelling out, "I have learned your walk. I have learned your breathing. You are almost still enough." Then silence. The ribbon wound tight. No power. No hands. Later that day, I tried to find the land bridge. Low tide had just passed, but the path was gone. Not submerged. Gone. Only jagged, seaweed-streaked rocks stretching for miles. No signs of the old wood planks. No trail markers. Just ocean. Flat and endless. I stood at the edge for a long time, the cold creeping up my legs, and I heard the horn, just once, from directly behind me. I returned to the tower and found a new checklist on the desk, typed, no handwriting, no stains, fresh paper, and at the top, Cycle 2, Replication stage. It listed tasks I'd never done before. Stand at the beacon for 3 minutes. Breathe with the horn. Face your reflection. Forget. Begin. Again. At the bottom, in small gray type, you are not the first, but you're the clearest. The 4th horn call didn't come from the sea. It came from below. Somewhere deep in the foundation, lower than the fog, beneath even the bedrock. It was lower in pitch, too heavier, like a pulse made audible, a heartbeat inside the tower. I had been logging my days without realizing how long they'd been, because the sky didn't change anymore. Not truly. Cloud, fog, rain. Cloud, fog, rain. Red light, white sea. Red light, white sea. The checklist updated daily. Always typed. Always precise. The tasks had changed. I wasn't maintaining anything anymore. Now the list simply read, sit in the beam for 1 hour. Say nothing until after sunrise. Let the glass remember your face. Echo your last words. Do not speak after the 3rd repetition. Do not listen to the version at the top of the stairs. That night, I climbed the tower and looked for the reflection again. It was already there, waiting for me. Not moving, just watching. The glass had lost its reflective quality. Now, it was a window, and behind it, a room identical to mine. Same stairs, same lamp, same narrow lens. Only this time, I saw the version of me I hadn't quite realized was missing. Still, hollow-eyed, breathing too slow. Its lips moved. I listened, but it wasn't speaking in my voice. It was using his. My brother's. I didn't run. There was nowhere to go. I descended the stairs instead. The hum in the walls became a rhythm. Familiar. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't electricity. It was respiration. Inhale through the vent pipes. Exhale through the horn. Back in the supply room, the typewriter was active again. No one touched it. It clacked softly. One line, repeated. The roll remembers you. The roll remembers you. The roll remembers you. The checklist updated again. This time, it was one word only. Submit. That night, I saw the extra door, halfway up the stairwell, where no door had been before. Rust-streaked metal, old naval bolts, a plate above it, dulled by sea wind. I wiped it clean, etched into the brass. Cycle room A, archive, in process. I unlocked it without a key. The room beyond was narrow, windowless, lined with mirrors not reflecting glass, but recording panels. Each one shimmered faintly with heat, and in each one, a version of me, sleeping, typing, staring, crying, dozens of poses, dozens of me, some blinking, some whispering things I couldn't hear, some facing away, like they knew I was watching. There was no control panel, no off switch, just one plaque bolted into the far wall. Lighthouse Redmare, Behavioral Imaging Station 6. All patterns must be sealed in repetition. All rhythms must be clear. All reflections must eventually wave. This light is not for warning. This light is for learning. Thank you for your role. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, watching, and then something behind the mirrors breathed back. Not in echo, but in practice, as if rehearsing how to be me. I ran back to the bedroom, or what had once been the bedroom. Now it was wrong. The cot too short, the pillow too flat. The books were missing, replaced with hollow shells that had blank pages when opened. Even my boots had changed smaller, worn in the wrong places. I opened my journal. The entries were gone. All of them, replaced with variations of the same sentence. He adjusted well. He adjusted well. He adjusted well. And at the very bottom, cycle 3, readiness 97%. I stopped reading the checklist. It didn't matter anymore. Even when it changed, and it always changed, the actions it listed were ones I'd already done. Stand here. Sit there. Watch the beam. Forget the hour. Forget the day. Forget the point. The final entry simply read, "Remain. We'll take it from here." That morning, I found a version of myself sitting at the desk, breathing, blinking, staring out the window at fog that never lifted. The chair creaked softly beneath him, like it always did when I leaned back. I stood there and watched him for a long time, then walked past him, down the stairs, and into the heart of the lighthouse to